Stillman and Company is delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 1025. The Game. Here we go on a Tuesday. Caroline Fenton, hello. How are you?
I am great. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. We had a good night last night out at the Predators game. Somehow, the bosses got a suite last night for the game. I'm guessing it had to do with the increased capacity.
We appreciate it.
But yeah, we certainly appreciate it. I thought we had a great time at the game. Now, I mean, I'll be honest, Caroline might have had a bad time at the game. You know, she was there dealing with Joe Rexroad and I's consistent arguing, which, by the way, I would like to state for the record, Joe's son, Brennan, I think definitely set Joe straight yesterday, which I thought was very important. Joe needs that in his life.
I want to say Joe's son said something. I could overhear y'all, and Joe's son said something, and Joe said, oh, that's a hot take. And you said to Joe, like, father, like son.
Oh, yeah, Joe said something. I think Joe's son said something like, trade up in the first round for a quarterback and get rid of Tannehill. I think it was something like that.
That is a sizzling hot take.
I told Joe, I said, if you write that, more people will click on that story than all the Belmont basketball and Lipscomb softball stories Joe likes to write combined. But enough about Joe. So, Caroline, I am a trend guy. I mean, I don't look at this industry. I don't look at sports talk or sports media. Everybody has a job to do. If you're the left tackle, your job is to block the guy in front of you. If you don't, you get fired. In sports media, the job is not to be right. And I think this makes people really angry. I try to get it right as much as possible, but I'll raise my hand when I say I'm wrong. But that's not the job. The job is to be entertaining. The job is to give insight. The job is to give opinion. Mel Kiper Jr., how many times has Mel Kiper Jr. been wrong over the last 30 years? And when you think about the draft, does anybody remember what Mel's mock was 5 minutes after the first round? Does anybody ever say, man, Todd McShay had Daniel Jones mocked in the second round in 2019, the day before the draft, and then he went with the 6th overall pick? I don't think they do. But I'm also somebody who somewhat keeps score. I don't keep score of how often Mel Kiper's right or how wrong Todd McShay is or anything like that. But I keep up with trends surrounding the Titans. I find the Titans to be a very tight-lipped organization. But it feels to me like around draft time, they maybe tip their hand a little bit. Last year, and I was just looking this up before the show, Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network, John Clayton, Rob Ring of NFL Draft Scout, Peter King, Charlie Casserly, Albert Breer, all mocked Isaiah Wilson to the Titans in the first round. A lot of people who didn't mock Isaiah Wilson to the Titans in the first round mocked Christian Fulton. The receipts are there. Jim Wyatt wrote an article. It's up on titansonline.com. I remember in 2018, the day of the draft, that was during the Preds Winnipeg series in the second round. And I remember, as we always used to do, Floyd's top 5 Titans targets. He had Harold Landry and Rashawn Evans on the list. We had a pretty good feeling then they were going after Rashawn Evans. The Titans, in theory, are a very buttoned-up organization. They don't let much out. But what about the draft? I saw another mock draft come out today. This is a dueling mock draft from Todd McShay and Mel Kiper. So what happens is Mel gets to make a pick, then Todd gets to make a pick. Then Mel makes a pick, then Todd makes a pick. I actually find it to be quite a fun exercise. In fact, Caroline and I are going to do this later in the show. But immediately, as I go through Mel and Todd's dueling mock draft, I go right to 22. Todd McShay's pick, Elijah Moore, wide receiver, Ole Miss. Caroline, have we heard that lately, Elijah Moore in the first round of the Titans?
That's really all we've heard as of late. And, I want to say a few weeks ago, we were hearing a lot of different names. Azeez Ojulari, Greg Newsome, a lot of names being thrown out there. But the consistent trend that I've seen within the past week or two is all Elijah Moore.
Elijah Moore. They keep throwing Elijah Moore out there. McShay writes, I keep going back and forth on Moore and Florida's Kadarius Toney. But I like Moore's explosiveness as a replacement for the Titans' free agency losses in the receiving game, Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith, and Adam Humphries. So now we have another mock draft, and another mock draft has the Titans taking Elijah Moore. Now I'm going to give TD credit to Ron Davenport because he's been talking about Elijah Moore for literally 4 months. Like, as soon as the season was over and there was talk about wide receiver, he was, hey, Elijah Moore. And every time TD comes on, you got to give TD credit. He said that he's been watching Elijah Moore since he was watching Ole Miss film for A.J. Brown in the 2019 draft. And I believe him because I've heard him say it enough. But I wonder, are the Titans letting the cat out of the bag? Is this a true reveal? Is Elijah Moore legitimately in play with the 22nd pick? Everybody that has come out with their mock drafts, or everybody that, they never mock Elijah Moore at 21. They never mock Elijah Moore at 25. In fact, in almost every mock draft before the beginning of this month, we didn't even see Elijah Moore in the first round of anybody's mock draft. We've seen Terrence Marshall Jr. at LSU in the mock drafts. We've seen Tutu Atwell at Louisville, a wide receiver, in the mock drafts. We've seen Rondale Moore. We've seen Rashad Bateman. We've seen wide receivers at the back end of the first round. We haven't seen Elijah Moore. Now, all of a sudden, we keep seeing Elijah Moore. And we keep seeing Elijah Moore and the Titans. I can't even remember whose mock draft it was last week. It was Mel Kiper Jr.'s. Who do you have at 22 to the Titans? Elijah Moore. This is a month after Mel's previous mock draft when Mel had Kadarius Toney out of Florida with that pick. Toney not even in his first round. What football did Elijah Moore play? What football did Kadarius Toney play between then and now that would have Toney out of the first round and Moore into the first round within a month? So I wonder, this is one of two things. Another day, another mock draft, and it is either groupthink, where somebody said Elijah Moore, somebody got excited about Elijah Moore, probably TD, somebody got excited about it, and everybody said, oh yeah, that'd be a great pick. Or the Titans have let it be known that this is their guy. And I don't know which one it is. But I go back to this. Peter King, and all due respect to Peter King, Peter King is not a football guy. Nobody looks to Peter King. And when I say he's not a football guy, he's not an X's and O's guy. Peter King's a great reporter. Peter King has been reporting for forever. Peter King is not breaking down game tape. Peter King's reporting. John Clayton is a reporter. I love John Clayton. But John reports the news. That's what he does. That's why Floyd used to love him so much, because he felt like John Clayton's information was the best. Both guys mocked Isaiah Wilson to the Titans last year at 25. 28. Carolina, I don't think that's an accident.
No, and that's what makes me wonder. Who knows something and why and how?
Where is it coming from? Again, is this kind of a groupthink? Is this a natural groupthink that one guy, and the NFL draft is like this, and let's be honest about the Titans. They're not the most popular team in the NFL. There's not 10 beat reporters that go on television every day and break this stuff down. There's one guy at ESPN I think they listen to, and it's TD, the guy who works for him. Everybody else, I mean, you talk about the Patriots. If there's a story with the Patriots, there's Jim McBride of the Boston Globe, there's Jeff Howe, The Athletic, there's Tommy Curran of NBC Sports Boston, there's Mike Reese of ESPN. I mean, they got 17 beat writers that are all considered guys that you would see on television or you would have on a radio show, or you would. At ESPN, there's one. It's Tehran. Tehran loves Elijah Moore. And I'm not taking anything away from TD saying that. But it would lead me to think that perhaps there's some groupthink there. I mean, TD even told us last week when he came on the show, he texted Mel after Mel mocked Elijah Moore to the Titans saying, I like that pick. All these guys talk. So is this everybody, at the networks and everything see Tehran Davenport say, hey, this guy knows the Titans way better than we know the Titans. What's TD think? Or is this like last year, when somehow, some way, Daniel Jeremiah, John Clayton Peter King, Charlie Casserly, and Albert Breer all drilled the Titans' first-round pick. A guy in Isaiah Wilson who was projected by some to be more of a second-round pick than he was a first-round pick. And I'm not going to sit here and play the revisionist history games about who knew what about his off-the-field antics, but there were a lot of these mock drafts that came out and these big boards that had Isaiah Wilson more as a second-round guy than they did a first-round guy. And yet all these credible guys seem to nail who the Titans were going to pick, especially when right tackle, the local people, us kind of people, we knew they needed a starting corner. We felt confident Dennis Kelly could play right tackle. We knew they needed a starting corner. In a draft where Trevon Diggs was going to be available, we thought A.J. Terrell was going to be available, Jeff Gladney was available, Jalen Johnson was available, Christian Fulton was available. So we're all thinking corner. They need a starting corner. Logan Ryan walks out the door. We're thinking corner. And yet all these high-level guys, the NFL Network's number one guy, Daniel Jeremiah, John Clayton, Peter King, Charlie Casserly, Albert Breer. This is, it's a little questionable how all those guys got that. Just thinking back to last year. It's a little questionable. Everybody knew in 2018. It felt like everybody knew that the Titans were looking at Landry and Evans. I think the idea that they get both of them was a little far-fetched. They did end up with both of them. And then there's 2019. I'll say this. As far as the media is concerned, nobody saw Jeffrey Simmons coming at 19. And nobody saw A.J. Brown at 51. Like, those were, when they both happened, I was like, whoa. Now, I had been tipped off beforehand that the Titans had a lot of interest in Simmons. I just didn't believe it. But there wasn't a lot out there in the media. So I wonder this. Are the Titans tipping their hand of who they want at 22? Are they tipping their hand like clearly they did last year? Are they tipping it this year with Elijah Moore at 22? A guy who in most mock drafts was not even in the first round. And all of a sudden he ends up at 22 in all of these mock drafts now that are pointing their finger at the Titans. That reminds me a lot of last year. And again, last year, a lot of people nailed the Titans pick. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. 615-737-1025. Everybody seems to love Elijah Moore more and more every single day. So is everybody coming around on him? Is it groupthink? Is it everybody else has learned what we've learned? Hey, Teron Davenport pretty much knows what he's talking about. So if TD is that head over heels for this guy, then you should be that way too. Or the Titans letting the cat out of the bag. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. 615-737-1025. Your thoughts again. Todd McShay, Mel Kiper, dueling mock draft Elijah Moore at 22 to the Titans. And then I saw what I think is the best big board out there. Everybody's got different boards. There's one out there I think is the best big board. And there's something that has to do with Elijah Moore that I have a hard time adding up with. We'll get to that coming up next. 615-737-1025, Stillman & Company. We are live from the wholesaling studio powered by RumbleOn.com. Caroline Fenton is here. Ian is here. It's ESPN 1025 The Game. We're streaming on the Game Nashville app.
I've been saying Elijah Moore would be an excellent pick for the Titans since 2019. You know what I'm saying? So,
right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I've been all over him. I fell in love with his game watching A.J. Brown, who was my number one receiver that year. And for me, Elijah Moore is a guy that even though – and I asked Lane Kiffin this. I said, what is it about Elijah Moore that sets him apart, and why do you think he'll be successful? And he said a lot of guys at that size, they don't play bigger than that 5'9". He plays bigger than that, and he has the right mindset. He compared his mindset to Amari Cooper, who he coached at Alabama. But then some of the things that I'm hearing, some scouts feel that workout that Elijah Moore had, which, by the way, he worked out with the running backs, some scouts feel that was one of the best wide receiver workouts that they've ever seen. Don't be surprised if he's the 22nd pick or one of the top 32 players to be picked. That guy is efficient with the football as far as making plays happen. He's a vertical threat. He goes up and he attacks the ball. He's someone that you could do whatever you want with. You want to run jet sweeps? Boom, do it. You want to run end arounds? Do it. You want to run choice routes, jerk routes out of the slot? Do it. You want him to go outside and win on the outside? Do it. You want to go vertical from the slot? Do it. That's the thing about him that will make him so appealing to so many, personnel people. And I don't be shocked if he's a top 32 pick.
Teron Davenport, the president of the Elijah Moore should be drafted at 22 to the Titans fan club. I don't want to say fan club because, TD's very serious about how he's not a fan, which is fair. If I were in his position and I did my job the way he does his job, I would want people to know that. But I have a hard time not calling Elijah Moore TD Jr. because of how TD talks about him. And now everybody is starting to jump on the Elijah Moore bandwagon again. Todd McShay, Mel Kiper dueling mock drafts. So Mel goes 1, Todd goes 2. Todd goes Elijah Moore over Kadarius Toney out of Florida. He goes Elijah Moore at 22. It should be noted, somebody texted me and said that Elijah Moore's pro day, which TD was alluding to in that clip, Elijah Moore's pro day opened some eyes. Apparently people that were there just absolutely gushed about it, and his pro day was March 25th. So that was in the last 3 weeks, where now we've seen all these mock drafts starting to put Elijah Moore to the Titans at 22. I'm not going to point any fingers here, but I don't think I've seen a lot of other mock drafts that have Elijah Moore in the first round anywhere else. I feel like the mock drafts I look at have Elijah Moore in the first round at 22. And that's where I'm like, have the Titans let it be known that he's their guy? Are the Titans pointing their finger? Are the Titans saying, hey, he is the guy? Because even though they've never just come out and said, hey, we've got the 25th pick in the draft and we really want Rashawn Evans. It was obvious before that draft. We knew they wanted Rashawn Evans. We knew they wanted Harold Landry. Clearly, all the guys who did the mock drafts last year, not all, but a lot, knew they wanted Isaiah Wilson. Locally here, I think we all knew they liked Christian Fulton. They're not hiding, for the most part, who they really like. I mean, when I think of draft surprises in John Robinson's tenure, I didn't think Corey Davis or Adoree Jackson was much of a surprise. I didn't think Rashawn Evans was a surprise. I didn't think Jack Conklin was a surprise. I thought Jeffrey Simmons, I thought Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, those were surprises. And the reason I think Derrick Henry was a surprise was because the Titans had DeMarco Murray at running back. They had 3 second-round picks that year, and they had already used 2 of them on defensive players, and then all of a sudden it's like, Derrick Henry? The Heisman Trophy winner, Derrick Henry? So I don't know. Is it just adding it up, or do we think that this is legit, that Elijah Moore is in play right here at 22?
It makes sense. And, we always say, okay, there's so many different needs that they need to address. They need to address the edge rush. They need to address the corner position. But I wonder, what else do the Titans know? Do they know that Azeez Ojulari is going to be gone? Do they know that Greg Newsome is going to be gone? We can assume that J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain will be gone as well. So they may have been hearing through the grapevine, look, this team who's drafting ahead of you is taking these other guys from different positions that you may want. So your best available player at one position of need is wide receiver, and that's Elijah Moore. And maybe people are thinking, hey, he's kind of like an A.J. Brown Jr. coming out of Ole Miss, wide receiver. Elijah Moore actually broke A.J. Brown's receiving yards record at Ole Miss. Maybe people are thinking, hey, that would just be an easy position for Elijah Moore to come into and kind of follow in behind AJ Brown's footsteps,
Sure.
like an AJ Brown Jr. So it makes sense, and I don't dislike the pick at all. I would be totally fine if they went with Elijah Moore at 22, but I wonder, are these rumors that Elijah Moore is coming to Tennessee, is that based in fact, or is that based off of speculation and off of conversation and talk?
So when you say conversation and talk, do you mean conversation and talk by the Titans, or do you mean conversation and talk by all of us that has then kind of turned it into even more, now it's seeping through to Mel Kiper and Todd McShay? Because, I mean, one thing that would be brilliant, what if you really loved Azeez Ojulari? What if you really loved him, or you really loved Rashad Bateman? And so what you did was you let it be known, hey, we love Elijah Moore. And then if one general manager says something to a guy like that, I mean, he's probably going to run with it. Like if John Robinson called me today and said, yeah, Jared, I think just want you to know I really like Elijah Moore. I mean, he's a good, tough, dependable football player, just loves football. He's a Titan player. He loves football, just loves football. If John Robinson called me and said that, and I know the Robinson impersonation was very good there, but if Robinson called me and said that, what do you think I would do at 2 o'clock? I mean, it would be wrong for me not to open the show at 2 o'clock and say, here's what I'm hearing from the Titans. An unnamed source told me. So when you say, trying to figure out if it's speculation or if it's fact, are you referring to the fact being Robinson, Vrabel, the Titans are putting it out there, or just all of us are talking about it and it's just kind of snowballed?
I'm saying the conversation among media members that may just be snowballing, and then people run with it and say, okay, yeah, that would make sense. But also, I don't say fact, meaning that what John Robinson and Mike Vrabel say is fact, because they could be throwing up smoke screens left and right and trying to throw people off in terms of their draft strategy. So that's not necessarily fact. By fact, I mean John Robinson coming out and saying, no, 100% not a smoke screen. This is the guy we're taking.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see that. I don't think you're ever going to see that in an NFL draft. Maybe Jacksonville will tell you that this year. Maybe. But oftentimes you're not going to see that. And I just wonder, too, would John Robinson really be that careless? I mean, I'd like to think the Titans are a pretty buttoned-up organization, where you don't hear a lot of chatter. But I was thinking about this today. In New England, you don't hear any chatter. They don't let anybody talk. But here, I mean, I feel like we've heard some chatter over the last couple of years. This was, I want to give the Titans credit and say that they button it up and that they don't talk and that they don't do anything. And they're not one of these loudmouth organizations like Washington or the Jets or Cleveland or one of these teams that just can't shut their mouth. I mean, they're not one of those. But are they really all that buttoned up? We heard all the Clowney stuff when it was coming out. There was like a daily update on Clowney. And they even kind of fed into it. I went over all the guys who mocked Isaiah Wilson to the Titans with the 28th pick last year. I'm not here to badmouth. I'm not here to, the Mike Mularkey firing thing, you could have seen that coming from 20 feet away. I mean, it was so obvious between the, if they lose today to Jacksonville and don't make the playoffs, Mularkey's gone. If they lose to Kansas City, Mularkey's gone. To Mularkey talking about it at a press conference, and then the Titans saying that they weren't going to fire him, and then they did fire him. I mean, it was obvious. So is it really all that buttoned up?
Well, let's say it's not. Let's say it's not buttoned up. I'm not saying it is or it isn't. Is it really that big of a deal if it's not?
Yeah, I don't want my football team to be a loudmouth team. I don't think talking wins in this league.
Everyone knows that Trevor Lawrence is going to the Jags. That's no secret.
That's different than the 22nd pick.
That's
because
true,
somebody can get in front
pick.
of you. Like somebody can, and this is what goes back to the Elijah Moore talk. Is this some sort of a smokescreen? Is this some sort of a, hey, let's put it out there. Let's tell our, and I wouldn't say, because it's not the local Bobos who are carrying this out, but let's put it out there. Robinson, the one thing I'll say is he's not the kind of guy who is impossible to reach. He's not the kind of guy who's not going to take your call. He's not the kind of guy who's going to shut the media out. He's not that kind of guy. when he wants something to be known, he puts it out there. When they were pretty much done with Isaiah Wilson, he put it out there that, yeah, if Isaiah wants to be on this team, he's going to have to do X, Y, Z in a press conference. He told Peter King when he took the job and he had the number 1 overall pick, he kept alluding to the idea that he was willing to trade it. Now, that doesn't mean who he was willing to trade with. And when they made the trade, if I remember correctly, when they made the trade, he and Jeff Fisher agreed on the trade the day that Kobe played his last game for the Lakers. And so Jeff Fisher and John Robinson agreed not to leak anything, not to say anything, because here are the Rams going into Los Angeles, and they didn't want to take away from Kobe's day, which is fair. So they waited until the next day, and then it came out that they had consummated the trade. So that is buttoning it up. Robinson using Peter King, Robinson using the media to kind of put it out there for other teams. Hey, we're open for business on the number 1 overall pick. But then when he does the deal with the pick, he doesn't tell anybody. Like, I will say this about some of the surprises. The Ryan Tannehill deal came out of nowhere. It was a Friday during the SEC tournament. Caroline, I think you know now how we do the grid around here. And the grid was out. We were going to be talking, Vols were going to play Kentucky in a big game, and we were going to talk about, and all of a sudden the Titans trade for Ryan Tannehill. And now it's like, whoa. Everybody stop what you're doing. We got Ryan Tannehill. So Robinson does, he's not he doesn't telegraph everything. But it's also not totally, I would prefer my football team be buttoned up. But now this is pure gossip season is what it really is. And I'm trying to figure out if all this Elijah Moore noise, if this is legit, if this is a tip of the cap as to where they're going. And we can discuss it whether or not we like it. You said you liked it. I like it. Like, if you take this guy here, I don't love receiver, but again, I'm best player available. They do have to replace 2 positions. They have to replace Jonnu Smith. They have to replace Corey Davis. Josh Reynolds is going to replace part of one of them, but between Humphreys, Davis, and Smith, Josh Reynolds is not replacing all of that. So I think if you say, hey, remember yesterday in my mock draft, I didn't go tight end at all. Well, if you go with Elijah Moore, what you're kind of saying is, hey, you're taking on the production of the tight end that left last year, and Anthony Ferkser is going to keep being Anthony Ferkser. And so I guess I'm okay with that. But we're not even discussing whether the validity of the pick. We're discussing the noise around the pick, and that's what I'm trying to get to. 615-737-1025 is the phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll get to this big board that doesn't love Elijah Moore as much. We'll get to your phones as well. Stillman and Company, we are delivered by TriStar Moving right here, loaded today. Again, we are loaded for the drive. It's so funny. TD's been talking about Elijah Moore for literally 3 years. He's going to be on our draft show. I'm not one to sit there and tell people what to do, even though I kind of do that from time to time. Our draft show, between Chris Sanders, TD, and Mark Howard, I don't think you can get any more Titans-focused for a draft show. So that Thursday night, you can stream it, YouTube, Periscope, Twitter, Twitch. You can stream the show. You can listen to it. Maybe have ESPN on, mute it, hear what we're saying, all that kind of stuff. Just blow it out because we're going to have an incredible draft show covering the Titans. 615-737-1025. Tune in later on in the show. We will reveal a keyword for you to text into the game text line for your chance to win the T-Mobile Hockey Homegate giveaway. A Dos Equis prize pack, including a case of beer, dessert from Nothing Bundt Cakes, a T-Mobile prize pack, and food provided by 312 Pizza Company in Germantown. Stillman and Company is delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 1025 The Game.
Are there one or two things that you took from last year's virtual draft experience, the preparation and everything that you went through, that you were able to apply to this year's run-up that you feel like has made you more effective?
Well, like I feel like we've tapped into different sources at these colleges, and maybe gotten even more deep than we did last year. We were all kind of in a whirlwind last year with the entire country shutting down amidst the pandemic, and no pro days, and having to adjust our normal information gathering process to this virtual kind of world. I think the players that we've been able to meet with, 3 and 4 times, some of them, and we've gotten to all 5 on a lot of these guys, and will on all of them. They're more comfortable. The players are a little bit more comfortable talking, over this Wi-Fi connection, and they open up, as we get more into an intimate setting with Mike and I visiting with them. So, we've made some adjustments about how we attack this process, knowing that we're going to be in this virtual world, certainly as it related to last year.
There you go. John Robinson as the Titans get ready for the draft. Again, our big topic today, Elijah Moore, who Mel Kiper, Todd McShay, dueling mock draft. Todd McShay, Titans, 22. Elijah Moore, Ole Miss. Last week, Mel Kiper, mock draft, Elijah Moore, 22, Ole Miss. The Athletic has the consensus top 300 big board. Did you see this today, Caroline?
I did, yes. It was very interesting.
So they took 50 big boards. So they didn't just take Bob's big board and Steve's big board and Mel Kiper's big board and John Clayton's big board and Peter King's. They took them all. And they added up 50 big boards, and this is the consensus. So somebody might have something crazy like the Vanderbilt long snapper, Scott Meyer, at number 13 on their big board. But that's not going to register because that's just an outlier, and when you've got 50 big boards working together. Elijah Moore on this big board. Now, again, I don't know how this factors in pro days. Elijah Moore, 35 on the consensus big board. Terrence Marshall Jr. at LSU is one spot ahead of him. Kadarius Toney is at 29. Rashad Bateman, a wide receiver, is at 28. Then there's a bunch of other positions the Titans could have interest in. Azeez Ojulari is 20. Jalen Phillips is 19. Even Caleb Farley, if he falls to him at 18, could be available. So I'm not using all of the big boards as gospel, and I don't know what the Titans board would say, but I don't think you can take the 35th best player with the 22nd pick. So perhaps that means a trade down would be more likely in order for the Titans to get Elijah Moore.
And if they do decide to take him at 22, I still stand with my point earlier that I think it's an okay pick. But if you're going to take the 34th, 35th best player at 22, you may as well get something else out of it and get another guy in the top of the 3rd round.
Interesting premise. And I do wonder if you're the Titans, do you look at, hey, we have him ranked as the 35th best player on our big board. We can move down to 28 and take him, and then he's gone at 24. He's gone at 25. Then what do you do? Let's go to your phones. 615-737-1025. Phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Kinston is going to kick us off today. Thank you for calling the show. Go ahead, Kinston.
What's going on, guys? With the Elijah Moore talk, Jared, I use a little bit of your logic. And that is, on a run-first team, we were questioning if they should spend the first-round pick to replace Corey Davis. Now we want to spend the first-round pick on the slot receiver, who I know TD sometimes and other people talked about he could play inside and outside, but I've always thought of him as a second-round pick. I've never thought of him, his skill set first-round pick, but his size limits him. So I think that if they want him, they got to move back, and I think it's a bunch of fluff, really. The betting odds, all the insiders that I've read, all say that the Tennessee Titans are leaning defense early in the first round or for their first pick. So, yeah, especially you look at the value. Do you want Elijah Moore at 22 if you could get Amari Rodgers at 85 or at 53? This is a deep wide receiver draft, and that's a little bit too rich for me. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Kinston. I think that's kind of a tough call, right? Because I would agree, in theory, I want defense. I mean, yesterday when I mocked it, I could have taken Elijah Moore yesterday. And I took Azeez Ojulari because that's who I think, would give you the most bang for your buck at that pick, period. there is some thought that Elijah Moore is a second-round pick, that he is, and TD loves him. And I'll say this, Alvin Kamara, the draft is it's so unscientific. Alvin Kamara was a third-round pick who would go in the top 5 if he was out there today.
Oh, yeah.
But Dan Shanka, who's one of these draft gurus that goes on the Midday Show a lot, he was on today, and he was asked about Elijah Moore by Darren, and he is not as much of a believer in Elijah Moore as I think we're hearing now after his pro day. Here's what he said.
Tell us a little bit about Elijah Moore, and why do you think he's more of a kind of a mid-second round guy?
As a receiver now, we've got him, I think, our 7th receiver overall. But, yeah, as a player, you're right, the 42nd spot. But I think the reason we got him, well, the reason I know we got him kind of in that group, because there's a bunch of that size of wide receiver in that bunch with Tony, for instance, from Florida. You got Rondale Moore from Purdue. They're kind of bunched up there. Dwayne Eskridge is a little bit later. They're all kind of that guy that's around 5'9", 185, can really run and explosive. But Elijah Moore, if he went late in the first, because our grade on him is 8 something in the high 8s, and which means he's a second round guy. But if he's close enough that if he went in the late first, it wouldn't shock us. So late first would be a 9-1 or somewhere 9.05, somewhere in there. And so he's close enough to be, in that group. It's just a matter of the type of receiver that you want. If you want a slot receiver that's really explosive, he's not really an outside guy, but he's more of an inside slot receiver that you could put, on the outside once in a while. But he's going to make his money working the inside zone between the hash marks and crossing routes, tunnel screens, things like getting his hands on the ball, run after catch, because he is an explosive guy. So I think that's why we kind of favor the little bigger receivers, but there's so many of these that size, we've kind of got them bunched together there toward the top of the second.
So I don't look at whether or not a player should be a top 20 player in a draft because there are other players who are in that draft. I don't believe in that. Either you are, and I know that drafts work, that if there's not a lot of pass rushers, then the good ones go pretty quickly. If there's not a lot of quarterbacks, then the good ones go pretty quickly because nobody wants to be sitting there looking for a quarterback at 15 and having to bank on Kyle Trask. But I'm just saying, I hear people that love Elijah Moore, and now the Mel's and the Todds are mocking Elijah Moore, and yet I got a lot of people 35th best player, second rounder. He could work his way into the first, but and I'd say that I guess I find to be just a little concerning with all the talk. I see all your texts in there at 615-737-1025. Those we will get to, but we'll also hit the headlines coming up next as well. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Be sure to tune in every weekday for your chance to win $1,000. It's the game's 1K payday. Listen for keywords at 9, noon, and 3. When you hear it, go to thegamenashville.com. Enter the keyword for a shot at $1,000. Stillman and Company, it's ESPN 1025 The Game. We're streaming on the Game Nashville app. Stillman and Company, ESPN 1025 The Game. A lot of talk around Elijah Moore. He just keeps coming up in all these mock drafts. I promised your thoughts, so the text line is a poppin'. Again, our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Caroline Fenton is on the text line. What do we have, Caroline?
One texter said you have to draft Elijah Moore because after drafting Isaiah Wilson last year, you need a safe pick. Is Elijah Moore a safe pick?
I mean, I don't understand what made Isaiah Wilson not a safe pick, other than the fact that he was maybe a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. What was it about Isaiah Wilson? He was a project right tackle, but we don't know that never would have worked out. I'll be honest about the player Isaiah Wilson. We watched a lot of college games last year because we were stuck in our houses just like everybody else. And, I was at the point where the only people I saw this time last year, I saw Floyd, I saw my mom, I saw my dad. That was it. And then, obviously, the prostitute broke into my house, and, we had to call the cops and all that stuff.
I hate when that happens.
Oh, it was awful.
I hate when prostitutes break into my house.
So then I was around all those cops and everything else. But those are the only people. Those are the only people I was around. So we'd be just sitting at home watching college games, Isaiah Wilson was not a bad player. He was, you talk about big and could push and could move his feet and could pass block at right tackle. I didn't love the pick, but I saw what they saw. I don't know anything about Elijah Moore's personality. So I don't know what's a safe pick and what's not. The only thing I know about Elijah Moore's personality is he got flagged in the Egg Bowl for lifting his leg up and doing the Odell Beckham in the end zone for a touchdown celebration, and it cost him a game. That's all I know. So as far as safe pick, not safe pick, that's like the Bobby Knight game face thing, right? What's a game face? I don't know what a game face is. And that's how I feel, I guess, about this being a safe pick. What else do we have in the text line?
One texter said, if we take a 5'9" receiver like Elijah Moore at 22 instead of an edge or corner, I will lose it. Guys like Amari Rodgers, Josh Palmer will be there way later in the draft. I worry about the durability of a guy like Elijah Moore because he to his point, he's 5'9". He's about 180 pounds. He's not a big guy.
So I guess I don't get into the whole, if we take this wide receiver now, when we can take this corner and then go get this wide receiver later. I guess it plays into the draft, but does it really? Because you don't know who's going to be there. You have an idea who's going to be there, but you don't know.
And they may be there, but for a reason, because they're not as good of wide receivers as Elijah Moore is.
Sure. Derek Morgan, he was supposed to be the first pass rusher off the board in 2010. He, I think, was the third or the fourth, slipped all the way to the Titans, one pick after JPP, and Derek Morgan had an okay NFL career, but he's not JPP. So I guess I struggle a little bit with that. Time to take a look at the headlines. It is Caroline's headlines.
We're spanning the sports world. It's Headlines with Caroline on Stillman and
Headlines
Company,
with Caroline.
right here on Nashville's best sports talk.
ESPN
1025 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
Someone will let us know that you said the wrong thing.
Oh, my God. The amount of crying into the text line about it's Headlines with Caroline, not Caroline's
I
headlines.
appreciate the
So,
listeners looking out for me in my segment.
I just want to be like, look, I invented the segment. We kicked it around about what to call it, and, what are the headlines?
We know what it is.
What are the headlines, Caroline?
A little bit of news that came out today related to the Titans. Former defensive tackle Daquan Jones agreed to a one-year deal with Carolina. You would know more about Daquan Jones than I do, but he was a former fourth-round pick in 2014. 235 career tackles, 9 sacks over 99 games with the Titans.
Yeah, look, Daquan Jones, I think, was making $7 million. I think it was a 3-year deal he signed, and I'm not one to talk about the big old fatties because they, the interior offensive linemen, the interior defensive linemen, they do the dirty work. And I thought Daquan Jones and Austin Johnson in that 2019 playoff run, I thought they did a fantastic job. They stopped the Patriots on the goal line. They stopped the Ravens on a couple fourth downs. That was Johnson and Jones and Simmons and Casey, and they did a really nice job. Daquan Jones, given the Titans' current financial situation and kind of the way they line up, I'm not sure he would have been a good fit for this team going forward. I think Daquan is probably used up at this point. I think there's a lot of tread on the tires. But, 1 year, $4 million at Carolina. If he can stop the run there, maybe he gets another deal after this.
Yeah, and moving on, there was a lot of soccer news yesterday about the European Super League.
Boy, people were mad about that.
People were not very happy about it. So it would essentially be a 20-team league with 15 permanent members, some of the best, most prestigious clubs in soccer. And then the remaining 5 would have kind of a qualifying play-in game to play in the Super League. And a lot of people were upset about it, and I'm not very in tune to the soccer world, so I won't speak to that. But I am pretty in tune to the college football world. So I created my own college football Super League.
Okay.
And I wanted to get your opinion on who I would choose for my college football Super League based off of historic significance, recent success, and just overall brand name in college football. Number 1, I have Alabama. Speaks for itself. One of the winningest programs in college football. Ohio State. I have Oklahoma. Penn State. USC. Georgia. Florida. LSU, Texas, not a lot of recent success, but in terms of a brand name, it's huge. Notre Dame, Miami, the 80s and 90s are really carrying Miami there. Clemson, so that's 12, and I had kind of a difficult time picking out my last 3.
Vanderbilt?
Vanderbilt? You think that they're one of those iconic college football teams?
Vanderbilt, question mark.
Vanderbilt was not on my honorable mentions. They'd be probably a little bit further down there. But, I mean, maybe this is their year.
I think Belmont has a better shot.
Lipscomb?
Yeah.
So these were kind of my honorable mentions. Texas A&M, Florida State, Auburn, Michigan, Tennessee. Did I say Oregon?
I don't know if you did, but we'll
Oregon.
put them in there. Okay, so here's what I would say about that list. I would say that Michigan has to be in there. First of all, Alabama, to me, if you were to put the college football kind of superpowers in there, Alabama, Ohio State, and Texas all have to be in there. Mm-hmm. There's no way you can do that without them. Texas has their own television network. Like, you can't not put Texas in there.
They're one of the strongest brands in sports.
They have to be in there. I also think that if Ohio State's in there, Michigan has to be in there. Notre Dame has to be in there. They have the best television contract in all of college football, even though I don't think the popularity of Notre Dame is what it used to be. Like, I think the old P-Pops, like when they saw an ACC logo on Notre Dame's field, I bet they probably lost their minds.
They hated it.
But, Notre Dame felt at home in the ACC.
They're in the ACC in every sport except football.
I mean, they are in the ACC. But I still think, they're popular. So I would say that Notre Dame, Alabama, Ohio State, Texas, Notre Dame, those 4 have to be in. Mm-hmm. Then I want the top rival of every team who's in that you added. So I want Auburn in. Mm-hmm. I want Michigan in, and I think Michigan belongs in.
Right.
And I want Oklahoma in because I have Texas. I need California represented, so you have USC. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably fair. So I think those are the teams that have to be in there. At that point, as long as you're not putting in Virginia Tech or you're not putting in Illinois or you're not putting in Arkansas or some crap school that has no business being in there, I think you can probably make the case for anybody. I would probably put another Texas school in there. I mean, this is college football, so I would put Texas A&M in there. Mm-hmm. I think LSU has probably earned their way. 3 national championships with 3 different coaches in the last 20 years. I think that probably, fits the bill. Georgia, if I had to say, Georgia might be odd man out.
You think so?
Georgia might have a hard time fitting in there. Maybe you go Georgia over Miami, but I think Georgia might have a hard time. Florida is certainly in there. Mm-hmm. Tennessee, look, man, Tennessee's not getting in there. I'm sorry. It's just not.
Tennessee was really riding in the 90s.
Yeah,
it's
just not.
Yeah, my basis was kind of for any of these teams, you would have to say, oh, that's a good matchup for any of these teams.
Is it wrong that I look at it from a TV standpoint?
No.
Where I'm like Notre Dame has to be in, Ohio State has to be in, Texas has to be in.
Because you look at any matchup with, let's say, Texas, you're going to say, oh, that's a big game. There's going to have eyes on that game just simply because it's Texas.
Right. Texas doesn't play.
They're not really that great of a team.
Texas doesn't play games on ESPNU. No. That is not Texas is, no, they're not doing that. And when they play the bum schools, it's on that Longhorn network because that's why it exists, because they have so many fans. What else is
So also we have Mel Kiper and Todd McShay's back and forth draft, and we'll go into that a little bit later. But we have a lot of talk surrounding Elijah Moore and that second round pick. What's going to be there? Is it going to be wide receiver if they don't take one in the first round? Is it going to be corner? Is it going to be an edge rush? But I kind of wanted to take a look at the guys that they mocked in the third round. They have a tight end, which we did not address in our mock draft yesterday, but I thought it was interesting that they picked a tight end when they also mocked Elijah Moore in the first round. So they mocked Pat Fryermuth out of Penn State, two-time team captain in Ohio State. In 4 games before he got injured in 2020, he had 23 receptions, 310 yards, and a touchdown. 15 touchdowns in his first 2 seasons.
I think the Titans, whenever I hear about tight end, I always wonder, how is he as a blocker? I think if the Titans draft a tight end in the top 4 picks, so those top 3 rounds, it's a guy they're going to want to play. They're going to want to play that guy over Ferkser. But can he block? Because the catching, it usually takes time for a tight end to come along in the NFL. But blocking, you got to do that right now. Like Derrick Henry is on your team. You have to block right now. So I think that's kind of an important element to all of this. I think they've got to block right now. And so I don't mind the pick at tight end. I just have to ask the question, what kind of blocker are they? And that's something that obviously we wouldn't know. But I do wonder that when it comes to, like, if I had to pick in the Dane Brugler mock draft in the 3rd round, he's got Tommy Trimble out of Notre Dame at 73. He's got Brevin Jordan out of Miami at 74. I'm willing to guess Brevin Jordan is the better receiver, Trimble the better blocker. My gut says if I'm the Titans, I would take Trimble over Jordan because I would take the blocker over the better receiver. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm looking at the Giants draft prospect for or draft outlook, for Pat Fryermuth, and they say the best that he is at is size, athleticism, route running, and pass blocking. But run blocking is one of his weaknesses.
Ooh. Then no, not interested.
All right.
Not interested. Caroline's headlines. How about the Predators last night? Get their rear end spanked against Carolina. And I use spanked loosely. I mean, they got beat. They got beat handedly. Boy, did they take it to Chicago last night in what was a must-win. Our thoughts on that coming up next. How big of a deal was that? What did we make of last night's game? Stillman & Company is delivered by TriStar Moving. It is draft season, but it's also moving season. And that's why if you're looking to move, you need to give my friends at TriStar Moving a call. TriStar Moving will get 5-star service throughout the entire process. Everything, and I mean everything, is taken care of. And I know this because I am a TriStar customer myself. I moved in October. TriStar did a fantastic job. They took great care of everything. And they'll take great care and make it as stress-free as possible just for you. They have a brand new state-of-the-art storage facility in Mount Juliet for all of your belongings. Their owners, Garrett and Robert, are true Nashvillians who care immensely about helping this community. TriStar Moving, 615-640-1219, or visit their website at nashvillemoving.org/radio. They'll give you 5% off your entire move. That's TriStar Moving, 615-640-1219, nashvillemoving.org/radio. TriStar Moving, my official movers. Stillman and Company is delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 1025 The Game. How about the Predators last night against Chicago? Taking care of business. Caroline Fenton, you were there at the game last night. Joe Rexroad was at the game last night. Ryan Porth was at the game last night. Chase McCabe at the game last night. They got us a suite last night. We were very thankful for that.
It was very nice.
It was very nice. And I will have to give it, you guys think I give Joe a hard time. His son, boy, he was giving Joe the business, as Joe needs. But not only was Joe getting the business last night, the Predators were giving the business to the Chicago Blackhawks. I watched last night's game, and I tweeted this out. And I'm not much of a video game player. I used to be when I was like a kid. When I was 15, 16 years old, I used to play the football video game Madden all the time. And this was back in the good days of NCAA football. I used to play that, and I used to play the baseball game. That was it. I wasn't like a World of Warcraft or a, Ian, what do those kids play now? Fortnite. I wasn't, any of that stuff or whatever. But I played video games. And one thing I always learned was when you turned up the difficulty, it got really hard really quickly. And I tweeted out last night, and I said, it feels like the Predators are the same team that played Thursday and Saturday night at Carolina, but they lowered the difficulty setting on the video game. That's what it felt like watching them play Chicago. And it was good that they took care of business. It was good that they kept pace with Dallas, who pulled a victory out of their rear ends against Detroit in a shootout last night. The Predators are still in the lead in that playoff spot that is oh so coveted. But the one thing that bothers me is we talked about this last week, and I said I felt pretty confident that if the Nashville Predators and the NHL Central Division were the SEC East, the Predators would be Kentucky football. Right now, you look at the SEC East, Vanderbilt's not very good, Tennessee's not very good, South Carolina just fired their coach, they're not very good, and Missouri's not very good. Florida and Georgia are national title contenders on a yearly basis, but the other teams aren't very good. Right now in the Central Division, the Columbus Blue Jackets are not very good. The Detroit Red Wings are not very good. The Chicago Blackhawks are not very good. The Dallas Stars have their issues as well. And then there's Florida, Carolina, and Tampa Bay. Carolina and Tampa Bay, who like Florida and Georgia, are probably Stanley Cup contenders. After those two games with Carolina, and I heard on the postgame show, Chris Mason said it both nights, Hal Gill said it both nights, Crispy said it on our show Thursday before the game. You got to tip your cap to Carolina, and after watching them, I'm convinced they're a Stanley Cup contender. So how does that make us feel? How does that make us think about last night's game? Everything they needed to do last night, they did. Matt Duchene scored. They got scoring across multiple lines. They were more physical than the Blackhawks. They were better in net than the Blackhawks. They were more disciplined at times than the Blackhawks. They did what they needed to do. But yet, when you compare it with the Carolina series, how does it make you feel? How does it ultimately make you feel when all is said and done? Is the excitement of the chase what really matters? The excitement of every game down the stretch this year is going to matter, especially if they keep beating the Chicago Blackhawks. If they beat them tomorrow and they beat them on Friday, then you really are coming to a head with Dallas when you play them on May 1st. But I still kind of look at Carolina, and I still kind of look at Tampa Bay when Andre Vasilevsky is in net, and I still kind of feel somewhat empty. I hope I'm wrong. There are a lot of people that listen to me that don't like me who love to harpen back to 2017 when I didn't think the Predators could beat the Chicago Blackhawks in a playoff series. I sat in the office at Bridgestone Arena in a meeting with my bosses and the brass of the Predators, and I said, I don't think you guys can beat Chicago. Sean Henry stood up in that meeting, President and CEO of the Predators, stood up in that meeting and said, we want Chicago. I don't know what the saying is in the office right now with Tampa Bay and Carolina, but I keep looking at this, and there's no harm in being Kentucky football because I don't think Kentucky football fans look at a national championship and say, yeah, that's really in our grasp. I think they would love to beat Georgia. I think they would love to beat Florida. But the standards that they have for their basketball program, they don't have for their football program. And for good reason. But is that how we feel about the Predators this year? 8-4, going to a bowl game? Way to go. Is that how we feel? And when I ask that question, I'm not asking it with this sense of entitlement or telling you that we shouldn't feel that way. I'm not saying this saying, hey, making the playoffs and losing to Carolina in 5 or 6 games, that's a bad season. I'm not saying that. I'm asking you because it's your team. But last night, I think it affirmed the discussion that we had on the trade deadline day. The last 5 games, I think, have told us all we need to know about the Predators. Are they going to make the playoffs? I don't know. But are they contenders in this division? No. Do they have a shot to beat Carolina or Tampa Bay? Probably not. But can they make the playoffs? Yeah, I think they can make the playoffs. I mean, we will have. I am not knocking. I mean, I'm still watching every game. I'm still going to the games like I did last night. I'm still into this. But I think I keep asking the question, what do you want? What do you think when you watch that game last night? And that's a question for the fans. Caroline, you watched that game last night. You know all about the SEC. We talked about this yesterday when you said, what are things they need to see against Chicago that they didn't do against Carolina? And I asked you as an LSU fan, well, I mean, would you say that after you lose to Alabama? Hey, what do we need to do this week against Ole Miss? Probably not. I mean, they did what they couldn't do against Carolina. They got the puck in Chicago's zone. They put the puck in the net. They couldn't do either in those 2 games at Carolina. But it still kind of has a hollow feeling. And maybe I'm spoiled. Maybe there's like a sense of after the 2017 playoffs, after the 2018 President's Trophy, after all the talk in 2019, that there's like some entitlement that the Predators should be cup contenders, and if they're not, it's bad. Now, look, pro sports, it's not college football. The New England Patriots aren't going to be good for forever. Neither are the Kansas City Chiefs. But it just feels like watching the game last night, I enjoyed it. I had a great time at the game. I thought they played hard. I think they're doing what they should do. I just don't think they can compete at the top level. And so it kind of dampens my feelings towards a win like last night.
And I think it answered a lot of our questions that we had about this team of just exactly how good are they? Because we weren't really sure. They were winning all of these games. They beat Tampa Bay. We didn't really know exactly what their ceiling was, but I think we found that against Carolina. And yes, while the game last night was incredibly exciting and it shouldn't take away from anything, we learned that, okay, the Predators can beat Chicago. The Predators can beat Detroit. They can beat Columbus. They can beat a Vasilevsky-less Tampa Bay.
Curtis McElhaney, they can beat him.
Yes. They cannot beat the Carolina Hurricanes, and they cannot beat Tampa Bay, most likely, with their number 1 goaltender in net. So we learned what they are, and that's not a bad thing. But it just moving forward, it gives me a little bit of clarity of exactly what to expect from this team. And I expect them to make the playoffs. But if they do face Carolina in the playoffs, I do not expect them to make it past the first round.
Okay. So that's how we're starting this hour. 615-737-1025. For this season, is Kentucky football good enough? The Kentucky football metaphor. And I know that it sounds, let me just state for the record as we're talking about Kentucky football. I am not saying that historically the Predators are going to beat Kentucky football. I just don't believe in that in pro sports. Like Alabama's going to be good at football for forever, but that's not how pro sports work. So I'm talking about like the 2020, 2019, the SEC East as is constructed today. Vanderbilt's terrible. Tennessee's terrible. Missouri's not good. South Carolina's terrible. And then there's Florida and Georgia. And I look at the Predators and where they sit right now, and I say Carolina and Tampa Bay are up here. I mean, they are really up here. Those two, Colorado, I mean, they are up there at the top. Then there's you. And I think the perfect thing is we said after the Dallas game when they won in another shootout, we said, hey, you are that even with Dallas. You are that even. So how do you feel about it? 615-737-1025. We'll get to your calls. We'll get to your text next. Your thoughts on the game last night and your thoughts on this team as a whole. 615-737-1025. Stillman & Company is delivered by TriStar Moving. We're live from the wholesaling studio, powered by RumbleOn.com. By the way, I believe both Robbie and Joe hit their picks to click yesterday, but I could be wrong. I know Joe hit his because we were up in the suite.
It was Granlund, and then I believe Robbie picked Kelly Yarncrow.
Maybe. Tune in to Robbie and Rexroad every weekday morning at 8:45 when the Predators have a weekday game this season for your chance to participate in Preds Pick to Click. You can win a prize pack brought to you by New Amsterdam Vodka. Your next chance to participate is tomorrow morning. Stillman & Company, Caroline Fenton, Ian's here. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game.
Predators flip the puck down. Trennan goes after it. Down the right board, 4 seconds. Flips it out in front for Sissons. And then Sissons couldn't bury the rebound of his own shot. But the Predators win round 1 of this 3-round battle this week against the Chicago Blackhawks. The final, Predators 5, Blackhawks 2.
Mikhail, we've been pumping up this 3-game set for a few days now. How excited about are you of your ability to play up to the moment?
I mean, we were ready to play, and we got the first win of these 3 games, and that's it. Up to the next one.
That was Mikhail Granlund last night. So the Predators, as Pete Weber said right there, they take game 1 of a 3-game series. I will say this. I kind of, the Predators have been so into the playoffs for the last handful of years. Every year they were in. Now, last year there was a little bit of a chase towards the end, and then everything shut down. It is fun to know that tomorrow's Wednesday night regular season game holds a ton of weight. It's also nice that we'll be off at 5 o'clock because the game starts at 6. But what do you think of the analogy that I've made to Kentucky football?
I think it makes sense because Kentucky's good once every few years. They're not the best team. If they play Alabama, they're not going to beat Alabama. They're not going to beat Georgia. They're not going to beat Florida. But they'll beat South Carolina. They'll beat Tennessee. Their quarterback may throw 3 interceptions against Kentucky. So yeah, I think it makes sense. You're a middle of the road team. You're good, but you're not the best. You're not in the upper tier of teams.
A couple of years ago, Kentucky had a game with Georgia, and I want to say it was in November or October, where if Kentucky had won, it was in Lexington. If Kentucky had won, they would have won the East. And it was a big game, and CBS, when does CBS go to Lexington? So CBS is doing the game. And Kentucky didn't get blown out by Georgia, but Georgia made sure they knew who was daddy. And that's what I felt about Carolina this weekend. I'm excited about the playoff chase. I am. And there are a lot of people that will say, hey, anything about if there's anything that we've learned over the last 5 years about the Stanley Cup playoffs, is anything can happen once you get into the Stanley Cup playoffs. Now, I'm not a huge believer in that because I think these teams are really freaking good. And the 4th seed, in this case, the Predators, if it's them, you got to go through both of them. You got to go through Carolina first, and then you got to go through Tampa Bay. This isn't like 2017 when you went through the Chicago Blackhawks, then you got the St. Louis Blues. You may be going up against the 2 best teams in the league in order to get out of the division. So it's just weird. It's just different in that regard for the Predators. But it's exciting. They're playing hard. They're playing great. The coach is doing an excellent job. The young players look like they're earning their keep. We're starting to see some of the role players come on. This has been a productive season for the Predators, even if they get washed out by Carolina or Tampa in the first round. Let's go to your phones. 615-737-1025, phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. By the way, somebody texted me and said, don't forget about the Florida Panthers. They can really play. And I said, the Florida Panthers are like the 2019 Auburn Tigers. They're there, but they ain't Alabama with Tua, and they ain't LSU with Joe Burrow. Carolina, Tampa Bay, that's Alabama and LSU a couple years ago. That's Florida and Georgia just on top of the East.
Yeah, I think you can make an argument that Carolina or Tampa Bay is number 1 or number 2. You can make an argument for both.
Oh,
but
yeah, they
Florida
played last night.
Yeah, Florida is very much so that 3rd tier.
Oh, yes, very much so.
That 3rd position in that first tier.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Let's go. And, hey, they may win the division. So, but yes, you're right. Scott is going to kick us off this hour on the Preds. Thank you for calling. Go ahead, Scott.
Thanks for getting to me, Jared. I hate the Kentucky football analogy is just terrible. It makes no sense. But before I get to that, I can tell you why. Let me ask you a quick question first. Did you think the Titans, heading into last season, did you think the Titans were going to win the Super Bowl?
Going into the 2020 season?
Yes.
I thought they were contenders.
Yeah, that's not the way I remember it. But when it was clear that they weren't at the same level of the Chiefs, why weren't you advocating for them trading Jayon Brown and trading Corey Davis for draft picks?
Because it was after the trade deadline.
Season?
Because it was after the trade deadline. The moment that and you can go back and look through all the logs, when they lost to the Green Bay Packers on December 27th and got embarrassed after they had been beaten by the Cleveland Browns a couple weeks before, I said they're pretenders. They're not contenders. At that point, you can't trade Corey Davis. You can't trade Jayon Brown. You can't trade those guys. But I knew then that they were pretenders.
Like you said, the point is to get into the playoffs, and then anything can happen. Take 2020 and the bubble out of it. In 2019, both number 8s beat both number 1s in the East and the West. and the Blue Jackets swept the Lightning. So it's something that happens a lot more frequently in hockey than it does in football, and it happens a lot more in college sports. This Kentucky analogy, Kentucky and Georgia don't even pull from the same pool of players. If this was Kentucky and Georgia, the Predators would have nothing but fourth-round picks and lower, and Tampa Bay and Carolina would have nothing but first and second round picks.
Do you know
Saros and Rene would be the
Predators
backups
and
to
goals?
Vasilevsky if Tampa were Georgia.
Scott, I'm not going to keep talking over you. Do you know who leads the Predators in goals?
Yarncroke.
Okay.
Do you know why that is?
Would you ever consider?
Do you know why that is? Do you know why Yarncroke
Scott, I let you talk. Now I'm going to talk, and then I'll let you respond.
Okay.
Would you ever consider Calle Yarncroke the type of player that Tampa Bay runs out there as their leading goal scorers, or that Carolina threw out there the other day like Sebastian Aho? No.
Well, if Aho had missed half the season, possibly, yeah. You know, Stamkos, you would think, would be the Lightning's or Kucherov, but when they're not playing, it has to fall to somebody else. So kudos for the Predators guys like Granlund and like Yarncroke for stepping up. When I saw these last few games, what I thought, to answer your question from a while ago, is how much better is the power play going to be when we finally get Forsberg and Tolvanen back? We might be able to score on some of these teams.
So,
that was my thought.
Scott, I don't disagree with that. I appreciate your call. You got a lot better chance of scoring on the power play when Ellie Tolvanen's back in there. You got a much better chance of scoring on the power play when Philip Forsberg's back in there. But to go back to the Kentucky football analogy, like, how does Kentucky win games in the SEC? Kentucky does not recruit the same player as Alabama. Yes. Now, I mean, every now and then Kentucky might get a kid that Alabama wanted, like Drake Jackson, the center that's going to go into the NFL. Alabama wanted him. Matt Elam, I think he ate his way out of the SEC, but he picked Kentucky over Alabama a handful of years ago. You know, they were right there neck and neck for Damian Harris when Damian Harris went to Alabama. But Kentucky doesn't have the same player that Alabama or Georgia has, or Florida or whatever. But they don't even have the same kind of player Tennessee has. But what happens is Mark Stoops, I think, has done a pretty good job at Kentucky of coaching those guys up. And Calle Yarncroke and Mikael Granlund and those guys are playing really well right now. Granlund is playing better than he is. Yarncroke is playing better than he has played for the majority of his career. And that's good. But I think we learned this weekend that when you go in and you play that kind of team, the Carolina Hurricanes, like you got to have Ryan Johansson outplayed Jonathan Taves in 2017. Ryan Johansson's not outplaying a number one center right now in the NHL. That's the difference. Now, again, you can put in your back pocket, and a lot of people do, hey, in the playoffs, anything can happen. But I guess I'm just calling it how I see it, which is I just don't think the Predators match up well with these teams. It's not a huge knock on the Predators. I think a lot of this is kind of tipping your cap at how good those teams are, because those teams can play. What's in our text line, Caroline?
And to the caller's point, he's right that anything can happen in the playoffs, but just based off of the information that we have now, the Predators aren't going to beat the Hurricanes in the playoffs. Sure. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. It very much so could happen. One texter says, okay, cool, the Preds can beat the Blackhawks, but if you can't beat a top 10 team, then how good do you really feel about their playoff chances?
I think I've been pretty obvious in how I feel about the Predators' playoff chances. I mean, I don't want to sit here and knock about it. I mean, I think the goal right now is just to make the playoffs. I mean, I think that's all we can really care about. I mean, look, this has been fun. It's going to be fun. Like last night, up in that suite at the game, Ryan Porth busts out the phone. He's got the NHL package, and he puts on the shootout, the Dallas-Detroit shootout. I mean, we're scoreboard watching up there. We're watching that game, and we're watching this game. That's the fun of a playoff chase. But if you're asking about playoff chase, you know, in terms of what are talking about what the texter said, what are our chances of winning in the playoffs? Again, like, let's be realistic about what we saw from Carolina this weekend. They're freaking good. Let's be realistic about Tampa Bay. They're freaking good. And not only that, Tampa Bay's the last team that I think you could pull the upset on in a first round because it already happened to them, and they're not going to let it happen again.
And we mentioned Tolvanen and Forsberg coming back and how important it is to get that power play back where it was. Do you think with Tolvanen and Forsberg back in the lineup, would that be enough to compete with Carolina in a playoff series, kind of going off of one of the texters' questions?
No, but I will say this. I saw the Predators tweet out today that Ellie Tolvanen is day-to-day, which is down from week to week. David Poyle was on the midday show today, and he wouldn't say anything, specific, but he said there may be some guys that come back at the end of the week. Clearly, it feels like Tolvanen is one of those guys that may come back at the end of the week, and yes, I think you're a better team with him on it. But I do think there's a lot of injury crutching that's going on right now. And I hate to break it to you, but the way it looks like it's gone this season is one guy goes out, one guy comes in. As soon as the guy comes back in, somebody goes out. When's Carrier come back? That's a big deal, getting Alexander Carrier back. When's Tolvanen come back? When's Forsberg come back? So if you put a fully healthy roster out there, that'd be great. But this is not a utopian society. The Predators got to the Stanley Cup final without Mike Fisher and without Ryan Johansson. You're going to absorb injuries throughout the course of a playoff run. You're going to have to overcome it. They beat Chicago in the first round with goals from Kevin Fiala, with goals from Harry Zolnarchuk, Pontus Aberg, Colton Sissons. That's what they're going to have this year if they're going to knock off a team like Carolina. And that's a really, really big if. 615-737-1025. There was one big development in last night's game that I am definitely keeping my eye on. I want to touch on that next. Plus, David Poyle said something on the midday show, and then I think he kind of stopped himself, and then I think it was very interesting. We will touch on that as well. 615-737-1025, your number for your Preds thoughts. Get them in. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Those guys are proud supporters of the Nashville Predators. I absolutely love Hiller. They do a fantastic job. I know this because I use Hiller at my home, and I'm telling you that they are so easy. Today, I actually had to book an appointment on something, and it was something that Hiller sent me an email back. As soon as I hit it, Hiller sent me an email back, and they detailed out questions. I got it right back. Boom, time right in there. They also want to send you on vacation. With the purchase of a new whole home generator or select new HVAC systems, Hiller is giving you a free week-long vacation. With every purchase of a new tankless water heater, Hiller is giving you a free weekend-long vacation, and they'll pay for your gas with a $100 gas card. Choose from over 400 Marriott, Wyndham, Hilton, or Hyatt hotel properties. You got to take advantage of this unbelievable deal while you can. These deals are only available for a limited time, so make sure you schedule today. HappyHiller.com for all of the details. As always, happy you will be, or the service is free. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Tennessee Volunteers and your Nashville Predators. Hiller, call the Happy Face Truck today.
Predators across the Chicago line. Curling there, Yossi. Down toward the right wing corner. Centered now and fed back out for Yossi at the blue line. Left circle, he went. That shot in the net. It may have been tipped. And the Predators are on the board at 6:22.
Well, good movement. They battled for the puck in the corner, up to Yossi, over to Benning. Benning shoots it, and there's a high tip there from Eric Haula. Tip it just inside the post.
And it was a high tip, and somehow Matt Duchene got his puck on this, or got his stick on the puck, and Matt Duchene scored yesterday. Caroline Fenton, what do we think of that after we've been talking about Matt Duchene and the fans have just been giving Duchene the business? What did you think about that?
I thought that was Matt Duchene being like, oh, you're giving up on me? Really? Okay, well, here you go. And yesterday I said I needed to see some sort of production from Matt Duchene and in these 3 games in this series. And that was exactly what I needed to see. Not necessarily a goal. I didn't need to see a goal, but just some serious production out there, and a goal definitely puts the cap on that.
So I think it's hard. It's like in football. I think it's hard to sit there and talk about somebody as a good defensive lineman if they don't get sacks. The coordinator can come out and he can say, hey, you don't understand the play calls. You don't understand the responsibility in what we're asking him to do. You don't understand. You don't. And it's happened before. I mean, Dean Pease went nuts one time. I asked him about Daquan Jones and Austin Johnson and how they don't get sacks. And Dean Pease went nuts about, no, you don't understand what they're being asked to do. And hockey is obviously the same way. But ultimately, unless your name is Jadeveon Clowney, everybody expects to see some sort of results. Matt Duchene has to score goals. I'm sorry. Like when you were paid all the money and there was all the hype, even though there were people that were throwing up the warning sign saying, hey, he's not worth all this money, he's not worth all this hype, it still kind of matters. And you got to eventually get in the score sheet. I believe in Matt Duchene a little bit. Here's what I believe in. I believe that Matt Duchene is willing to give his all for the Nashville Predators. I mean, I think Matt Duchene at the end of the day, and I don't know Matt Duchene, but I feel like Matt Duchene cares about the hockey club. He cares about living up to his end of the bargain. He cares about what the team is asking of him. He cares about providing for the fans who initially were cheering him on. I think he cares a lot. Like, it means a lot to him. He's not, no, and I'm not throwing Ryan Johansson completely under the bus here. But, I mean, there have been effort questions that have surrounded Ryan Johansson. I don't think that about Matt Duchene. But you can't undo the hype. You can't undo the David Poile insufferable years of chasing after Matt Duchene like he did. And when you don't produce, again, unless your name is Clowney, when you don't produce, the angst that comes from it is almost too much. And I think Duchene has felt that pressure. I think he has felt that angst. And I was worried that, hey, if he doesn't come through now, the fans are already kind of 1 foot out. But then the team, I think, is really going to struggle with, hey, man, you're not doing your job. I know you're trying, but you're not doing your job. And I have always believed, I talked to Crispy about this, we've talked about this on the air, I have always believed that Matt Duchene is a better hockey player than what he was in the first year and a half with the Predators. He's a better hockey player than the guy who falls offside and cost you a playoff game last year. He's a better player than that. I have always believed that. It's like I was telling Adam Vingan a couple of weeks ago. People love to take a hot streak, like what Granlund's doing now or what Yarncroke's doing now. They love to take that, and they love to sit back, and they love to say, see, this is Calle Yarncroke. And I'm like, look, we've seen 6 years of Calle Yarncroke. I like Calle Yarncroke. But leading the team in goals is not what Calle Yarncroke is. He's not as good as he's playing right now. Matt Duchene, I told Adam, he's not as bad as what he's been so far. I believe he's a better player. Do I think he's a core piece of this team? I don't know. Like, can he really be that way? We certainly need to lower our expectations than what were sold to us about him. But I still think he can be a valuable part of the hockey club. I really do. And I just feel like last night was a step in the right direction for him. We need more consistency. We need more goals. We need assists. We need him to prop other guys up. We need all of it. But I thought last night was a step in the right direction. The other thing on the Duchesne front, Corey Curtis and I talked about this on Friday. And it is that Matt Duchesne, this may be his last chance, but Adam Vingan broke it down on the midday show. You might not be able to get rid of Matt Duchesne. Adam Vingan explained it in his head about people like I said on Friday, I think this is Duchesne's last chance. And I hope that Duchesne makes the most of this last chance, and then he's on this team for years to come. But Adam brought it up. Here's what Adam said as far as Matt Duchesne and possibly moving on from him at the end of the year.
I can't find a solution to the Matt Duchesne quote-unquote problem because no one's going to want to trade for him. If you try to dump him to Seattle in expansion, you're going to come out on the wrong end of that. No, you're not going to buy him out. So the thing that you have to do is you're going to have to suck it up and try to find a place for him to fit. And right now with Granlund playing the way that he's been playing, second line center is taken. So maybe you move him up to second line right wing. Who knows? But I see your point there, and I really do. I'm just there's no simple solution. With Kyle Turris, you knew that the buyout was the last resort, and that's what they ended up having to do. I just don't think you can swallow another buyout right now. That would look really bad.
And so here they are on the Matt Duchesne front. Adam may be right. There may not be anything they can do. I still think somebody looking to upgrade will take a bite on Matt Duchesne because they'll say, hey, Nashville screwed him up. But Adam brings up an interesting point. So what do you think of that? We'll get to your thoughts on it next. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Plus, what David Poyle said today that maybe gives us a little insight. We're going to read between the lines on this text. Stillman and Company, we are delivered by TriStar Moving right here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Streaming live on Periscope, Twitch, YouTube, Twitter. Just go to my Twitter, at Jared Stillman. Go to Caroline's Twitter, which I don't know off the top of my head. But
at Caroline Fenton 1.
Go ahead and do that. Plus, we're giving away something in the next segment, so be listening for that as well. Stillman and Company, it's ESPN 1025 The Game, streaming on the Game Nashville app. Stillman & Company is delivered by TriStar Moving. We got a ton of Preds reaction to get to. We've been kind of all over the Preds. Big win last night. Big game tomorrow night. But there is one thing, Caroline Fenton, today. You know, the general manager, David Poile, goes on the midday show every week. And I think he does, you know, he is as candid as a general manager can possibly be. You know, if the Titans offered us to have John Robinson on the show weekly, obviously we'd probably say yes. But I'm not sure John would say much. I give David credit because even though I'm not the biggest David supporter in the world right now, I at least appreciate the fact that, hey, you know, for the most part, he answers as honestly as he can. He is very candid. So today I was working out, listening to David Poile on the midday show, just saying, oh, you know, let's see if there's anything here that's, you know, of newsworthiness. And I heard him say something, and then as I listened to it, I kind of thought maybe he brought it back a little bit and kind of maybe gave a hint about something, and it surrounds the future of Pekka Rinne. I have no idea. Pekka Rinne is an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. I have no idea if Pekka Rinne plans on retiring. I kind of feel in my heart like maybe he does. But here's what David said about Pekka Rinne today. Take a listen.
Juice has clearly taken over the reins, but we do place, you know, back-to-back games coming up next week. We do play, you know, a series of 3 and 4, 4 and 6, those type of situations. And I think we're going to need both goaltenders. But again, it's, you know, it's inevitable. It's eventually going to be Pekka's last year, and I'm clearly not saying that it's going to be his last year this year. And I'm looking forward to talking to Pekka after the season to see what he wants to do. But you know, at his age and where he's at versus where Saros is, I mean, this is the natural progression. And
so my head popped up when I heard him say that because it was like, you know, hey, it's inevitable. It's Pekka's last year, and it's Pekka's. You know, I'm gonna want to talk to him at the end of the year, but it's almost like he took a step back, right? Like he realized what he said maybe, and then was like, well, you know, I want to talk to him at the end of the year. You know, I don't know. What do you think, Caroline Fenton? When you hear that, do you think that he is letting the cat out of the bag and then realize, oh, you know, hey, it's you know, we got to talk to Pekka at the end of the year, and we you know, what's up? Or do you think he really just meant, hey, it's Pekka's last year of his contract. We'll talk to Pekka at the end of the year. We'll see where things are. Or what do you think?
I think that, you know, if they were totally sold on extending Pekka's contract, then he wouldn't have said that. I don't think it means, yes, 100% positive he's going, this is Pekka's last year. I don't think you can read too far in between the lines, but I think it is very interesting that he did mention that because they have thought about that. He wouldn't have said it if they hadn't actually thought about, okay, if this is Pekka's year, what would happen? But I'm going to actually ask that question to you. Is it really the worst thing if this is Pekka's last year? Do we feel okay with UC Saros being the guy?
Well, I mean, I don't think we really have much of a choice. I mean, you know, look, Pekka is 38 years old, and he's clearly not, you know, his game has clearly fallen. You know, he's not the same guy that he once was. I mean, I still believe in him, and I still think the team, you know, can rely on him. And if Saros is playing average hockey in the playoffs like he did last year, I have no problem with them flipping the keys to Pekka in the middle of a playoff series. No problem at all. But I do think it's Pekka's last year. You know, I before I even heard that today, I thought it was Pekka's last year. And I have no sourcing on this. I thought it was Pekka's last year. And then when I heard Poile say it today, the way that he said it, it was almost like he let the cat out of the bag, but then he wanted to make sure that he covered his bases, you know, by saying, you know, I want to talk to Pekka at the end of the year. Because if he just says, well, yeah, you know, it's Pekka's last year, so this is the natural progression of things. Now Adam Vingan's writing an article about it. It's getting picked up by all the Pierre Lebrun's, and now it becomes Pekka Rinne's last year. I think Pekka should sign for one more year. And this is going to be totally selfish with what I'm about to say. I think Pekka deserves a season with full buildings where the fans can truly honor him in that last season. And if Pekka comes back next year at 39 years old, I think his play will be rather similar to what it is this year, which is that of a backup goalie. But I do think that the fans should be allowed to honor Pekka for an entire year. Like there should be like a goodbye tour for Pekka Rinne. That's all I'm saying. Text 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Kind of been all over the place with the win last night. Matt Duchene scores. Now this. What is in the text line, Caroline Fenton?
Troy texted into the text line. I thought this was interesting. In reference to Duchene, he said, a broken clock is right twice a day. Now, I'm not going to go as far and say that Duchene is a broken clock, but it definitely is pretty indicative of the public perception of Matt Duchene at this point.
I'll say this. Matt Duchene scored that goal last night. I'm not sure how much Matt Duchene had to do with the scoring of the goal. Like, if we're just being completely honest. But I plan to be a little bit more optimistic here. Something that often doesn't come from me when it comes to the Predators. I'm going to be more optimistic here. I'm going to say that this is the start of something. It's like, a guy's in a slump, a hitting slump, and he just needs a ball, and it just hooks right inside the foul line, and it's a double in the corner, and now he's rolling. When I was a junior in high school, I played baseball, and I was on the bench, off the bench, on the bench, off the bench, off the bench. I was really fat, but I was a power hitter. And so we played at Webb out in Bell Buckle, and it was the night of prom. I don't know why our coach scheduled a game on the night of prom, but it was the night of prom. And I didn't I went to prom, but it wasn't like a big deal for me. But the seniors were like, why are they going to schedule a game on prom? And so I think I was hitting like third in the lineup that day because the seniors had to get ready for prom. And I just went nuts. Like, I want to say I was like 3 for 4 with 2 doubles. Now, Webb doesn't have a fence, or at the time they didn't have a fence. I don't know what they have now. I hit a ball so hard that I think it would have left like First Horizon Park. But they didn't have a fence. So it ended up being a triple.
Roughly high in yourself.
Well, I mean, I hit home runs in high school. This is not like something that didn't happen. So it's not like it wasn't possible for me to hit a home run.
First Horizon Park.
Yeah, but I mean, like, what's a high school? What's a high school stadium? Like 340?
I don't even know.
So what's First Horizon? Like 320 down the lines? Like, I think it would have left First Horizon Park.
Okay, I'll give it to you.
So, anywho, like that triple and then a double and then like that day got me started. I think it was the same day the Titans drafted Chris Johnson, but I could be wrong. But that's what really got me started. And I had a great end of my junior year. I hit a grand slam in the state tournament, just everything. I mean, I caught fire at the end of my junior year, but it was that day that got me going. And I am optimistic that last night was what gets Matt Duchene going. The texter's probably right, but I'm going to go with my gut on this one. What else we have in there?
Also in reference to Duchene, one texter says the fact that Duchene did not stand up for himself when he was cross-checked numerous times by Duncan Keith late in the game tells you everything that you need to know about him.
He's not a glove thrower. He's not going to chuck him, and he's not going to. I don't
think that's necessarily fair.
When I see Duncan Keith cross-checking a bunch of people, I think somebody else has got to come to Matt Duchene's defense. Now, I understand. Look, Duchene's a veteran guy. Sometimes you got to throw the gloves off. Sometimes you got to protect yourself. Sometimes you got to fire one back. Sometimes you got to – I get it. That part doesn't bother me. Like that doesn't bother me. Now, if they went after – say Tolvanen was in the lineup, and they're on the same line, and they went after him, now I need Duchene to go up and do something.
Right.
But not when it's Keith cross-checking him. And I just don't believe at this point in the year you can start playing eye for an eye. This is how hockey works. You got a problem with a guy, you take it out next October. That's when you take it out. You don't take it out in the playoffs. And right now, you're playing playoff games.
Another texter said, while I think that last weekend was a reminder that the Hurricanes are a legit contender, I still have no doubt that if Forsberg and Tolvanen are healthy, that they can go toe-to-toe with them in a series. I am not going to say that I disagree, but I also don't know if I agree 100%.
I mean, you can't say no because there's no proof that tells you, hey, if these guys go in there, it doesn't make much of a difference.
It definitely, I think, would help, but I don't think that it's going to make a complete – it's not like this team's going to make a complete 180 and blow Carolina out of the water. You can't put that much stock into Forsberg and Tolvanen, but I definitely think that having them in the lineup, having them in the power play would make a difference.
Would it, though? I mean, like, a difference? Like, what is a difference?
I think that the Predator, and this is completely just
Subjective.
based in no fact whatsoever, but in my
But
opinion.
so is the take from the caller, though, or from the texter. Like
Yes.
that opinion is like that's what used to get me all worked up in the 2019 season. So they won the President's Trophy in 2018 because they wanted home ice. They lost at home to Winnipeg, so then home ice didn't matter, and they kind of put their feet up for most of the 2019 season. And the fans, the power play was a mess, and the fans just believed that, they'll turn it around. Playoff season, they'll flip the switch, they'll be good to go. And I remember at one point you say, oh, fine, you can believe whatever you want to believe. Because I can't tell you what to believe. And so that's how I kind of feel about this. You want to believe that they can beat Carolina with Forsberg and Tolvanen and Fabro in the lineup? Fine. You can believe it. We'll probably get to see. But you can believe it. You can believe it, and you go on your own way, and I can't tell you you're wrong because you could be right. I mean, I think I could argue that if, LeBron James decided to go play for the Grizzlies, that they'd win the NBA Finals. I mean, there's no way to disprove that. So that's how I feel about the broad spectrum. I don't like the injuries as a crutch because everybody has them. They didn't play with Tara Vyman. But Tampa Bay's not playing right now with Stamkos, Kucherov. They didn't play with Vasilevsky on Tuesday night. People still celebrated that. So I guess I'm not much for the injury-making excuse front.
I think it would be a smaller margin, but I still think that the Predators would have lost those games.
I still think it's a 5-game series either way. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Coming up next, I don't care when other NFL teams do this. I care when the Titans do it. I care a lot. I might be going on a rant here. That's next. Stillman & Company. We're delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 1025 The Game. We're streaming on the Game Nashville app. Stillman and Company is delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 1025 The Game. Trevor Matich, ESPN analyst, in 25 minutes. His thoughts on the NFL draft upcoming. There's some Titans news out there that is not surprising. And yet, I am highly annoyed by it. But first, I forgot to do this last segment, so I'm going to need to do it now. ESPN 1025 The Game and T-Mobile have teamed up to give away a hockey home gating party. Text the word GAME to 615-737-1025 now. Enter for a chance to win a Dos Equis prize pack, which includes a case of beer, dessert from Nothing Bundt Cakes, a T-Mobile prize pack, and food provided by 312 Pizza Company in Germantown. You must be 21 or older to enter. Okay, the NFLPA released a statement from the Tennessee Titan players. Quote, "We have come together as a team and have had several conversations about what is best for the players in our locker room. Based on the injury data from the previous year, along with the facts and recommendations provided by our union, we are in solidarity with other players across the NFL who will exercise their right not to attend in-person voluntary workouts. We understand that some players will need to be at our facility for different reasons during this time, and we respect the right of every player afforded to us in our CBA. The Titans are falling in line with the rest of the league, and they're not attending voluntary workouts this year." Now, I think we can all agree that COVID is not the reason why the Titans and these other teams across the league are not attending voluntary workouts. Fair?
That's fair.
Okay. I'm going to let you guys have your state on this because this one, this one really irks me. So what do you guys think about this news? Caroline, we'll start with you.
I agree with you that I think that they may be using COVID as an excuse to say, look, we don't feel comfortable showing up to workouts. We don't feel safe. We don't think that the NFL protocols put in place are going to protect us, so on and so forth. I don't think that that's really the case. Maybe the coaches are like, look, we really can't afford to lose any more guys due to COVID protocols. So maybe that there is a little bit of truth to it. Look, if they don't want to attend voluntary workouts, don't. It's only going to affect them. And they can say that we'll do whatever workouts we need to do to stay in shape, to get better, to get stronger. We'll do that on our own time. We'll do that at home. You can say that all you want. But if you don't actually do that, then you are only hurting yourself and your team and your playoff chances, your shot at a Super Bowl. So if you don't want to do it, that's fine. You're really only hurting yourself. If you do what you're supposed to do at home and you do get stronger, you do get better, then great. You're getting better and you're not really putting yourself at risk at COVID. Even though I don't think that's the reason why they're not doing it, at least they're not putting themselves at risk. So if you don't want to do it, fine. That's your choice. It doesn't affect me.
Ian?
I kind of agree. If they can, prove to the team and prove to some of the other players on the roster that they're accountable for, that they've been putting in some work in the offseason, then I think based on last year, from what we saw, they can get most of the work done virtually when it comes to some of this offseason stuff. Ideally, would they be in the building? Probably, but I'm not going to get too bent out of shape about it.
Okay, I disagree with both of you. I hate this. I hate it. When I started to see teams across the league do this, I knew inevitably the Titans would fall in line. And that's exactly what's happened. I don't care what other teams do, but go to work. That's what this is. This is NFL players that don't want to go to work. And the union is doing them a service by basically saying, you know what? We're going to use this as a chip in our back pocket for our next round of negotiations, that if they want us there at the facility, they're going to have to give us something in return. It's almost like Major League Baseball, who stupidly is making us watch pitchers hit for an entire season because they want to use that in their back pocket for their CBA negotiations. Go to work. You are an NFL player. You are paid a fortune. Go to work. I'm sorry. There are a lot of people in this pandemic that have adjusted their day-to-day lives based on realizing, you know what, we don't have to fly across the country to go to a meeting when we can just take a couple clicks on our computer and we can have that meeting. And I'm for that. But I don't think that canceling the off-season, the OTA program, I don't think that that's actually beneficial to the players. So when I saw All the other teams sit there and say, yeah, the injury data says that we shouldn't do OTAs. I thought to myself, good. Let every other team sit on their asses at home and get fat and do nothing and not be with their teammates and not be with their coaches, and let the Titan players go to the Titans facility and let them train with the Titans coaches and let them get instructions from their new offensive coordinator and their new defensive coordinator, and maybe not absolutely suck on defense. Maybe. But no, the union. Here's the union. Hey, don't go to work so we can use it as a negotiating chip. I used to always hear, it's so freaking lazy. That's what this is. It's lazy. It is so freaking lazy. They just don't want to go to work. That's what it is. Like, I've always joked, Floyd and I used to joke all the time, that we said, hey, once the Predators get knocked out of the playoffs or the NFL draft's over, we should just take a month off and then come back at the start of training camp and get right back into it. And we joked because we knew that wasn't realistic. We know that they're not going to just give me off June and July. They're not going to do that. Because I have to go to work. Because it is work. Because it is a job. And oh my God, I hate this. I hate when guys who make all this money are like, yeah, I'll stay at home. Yeah, I'm good. I'll stay at home. That is so freaking lazy. To all the people that last year were like, hey, last year proved we can have a season without having to have the off-season program, and we can be just fine. That's because the off-season program was canceled for everybody. So everybody didn't do it. So everybody had the same lack of training. Guess who organized workouts for his team? Guess who got kicked out of a public park? Guess who went to a local high school when the pandemic rates were surging in Florida? Tom Brady. And guess who was out there with Brady? The rest of the Buccaneers offense. And guess what happened to the Buccaneers this year? They won the flipping Super Bowl. It's so lazy. It is so lazy. These players are lazy. And I get it. It's not the players. It's not Derrick Henry who's saying, I don't want to go and work out with my teammates. I don't want to go and get on the field and the instruction from my offensive coordinator who's new. It's the guy at the union who has been just spanked by the owners for the last 3 negotiations that's like, we got to get something in our back pocket, and he's going to the player reps, and he's telling the player reps, hey, we got to hold out of the offseason program. We got to do this. So now the players release a statement, but it's lazy. That's what it is. And I'm sorry, but I think there are a lot of Titan fans out there who don't want to hear about how, you know what, it's just better if I stay home instead of go to work. Because that's what it is. It's work. I don't work for the Titans, so I can openly say this, because you can't say this if you work in the NFL. You can't say that the voluntary mini camps and the voluntary off-season program and that it's all voluntary, because it's really not. It's mandatory, or it should be mandatory. Because when I look at my team, and I say, hey, my team is dedicated. Ryan Tannehill is dedicated. Derrick Henry is dedicated. Taylor Lewan is dedicated. Those guys are dedicated to winning for the Titans, for you, the fans. But now they've been pressured by the union not to go to work. And it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. But it's just lazy. It's lazy.
They're not going to work. It just means they're not doing voluntary workouts.
As a team.
As a team.
With their coaches.
They're still going to be working, and if they're not working out on their own terms, then they're only hurting themselves. If you this morning did not sit down and write any notes or do any prep for the show, who would that affect? It would affect you and this show. If they choose not to work out, it affects themselves and their team.
If they choose not to go to organized team activities, Todd Downing, their new offensive coordinator, cannot tell Ryan Tannehill what he wants. He can Zoom with him, but he cannot sit there on the field and say, no, Ryan, go this way with the ball. He cannot tell Josh Reynolds, a new wide receiver, hey, Josh, we want you to run it 7 yards cut in. They can't do that. They cannot do that. Ian, you will back me up on this. How often did the GM always talk about wanting the players on the field, wanting them in the facility? Like, this is not
Well, I don't know about necessarily in the facility, but he wanted some type of off-season work with the wide receivers and quarterback.
The idea, he told us one time that a guy's trainer, and I totally believe this, a guy's trainer is paid by the player. So even though the trainer his job is to make the player, put the player in better shape and, get him stronger and faster, and that the player ultimately doesn't want to be yelled at every day by the trainer. That he doesn't want to pay a guy money to sit there and yell at him and say, hey, stop being lazy, push yourself, this, that, or the other. That the real pushing comes when it's somebody who you can't fire that is doing the pushing. That the real pushing comes when you are around your teammates who are pushing you. I had college students last year who were saying, just let us play. We just want to play. We just want to be together. Just let us play. And now, after the entire league went an entire season through a pandemic, and now we know more about it, and we have vaccines, and we have all this stuff, and now all these players are like, yeah, man, I just don't think it's very safe. I don't think it's very safe. I don't think it's very safe for us to go, so I'm just going to stay at home. It's lazy. Oh, God. And it's, you know what else bothers me, too, about this? It's that negotiating thing. It's like, the union wants to get something on the owners. And let me say something. The owners don't care. The owners don't care. The owners don't care that there's no off-season program. And the reason they don't care is because it doesn't affect their bottom line. So you think you're adding something to your pocket that you can negotiate with, when really the owners are laughing at you. Just like they laugh at you every time they negotiate a new deal. They laugh at you. That's what this is. This is as bad, in my opinion, for the Titans players. This is as bad as Major League Baseball making us watch pitchers hit this year. Next year, there's a new collective bargaining agreement in baseball. There will be a designated hitter in both leagues. I was a National League guy, and I was like, I don't know if I like the designated hitter. We had it for 60 games last year. I'm like, get the DH in there. And the fans want it. The sport wants it. Like, the people in the sport want DH in both leagues. And the owners are like, we need to keep that in our back pocket. In fact, they offered it to the players this year in exchange for expanded playoffs. And the players said no. So now it's got to be a negotiated issue. That's what this is. And I'm sorry. Go to work. I would love it if all 31 teams said, no, we're not going to go do the offseason program. But the Titans said, no, we're going to be the one team that does it. And I guarantee you would see results on the field if that happened. What the NFL's, I get it, the Players Association, they got to be tight. They got to stand united. They got it. Just drives me insane. It just go to work. You guys make too much money. Go to work. Everybody else in America has to go to work. Everybody else in America took pay cuts. Go to work. I got my taxes done last week. I didn't make as much money in 2020 as I did in 2019. And guess what? I was glad that I was still able to go to work. But guess what? Go to work. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. I told you I'd go on a rant there. Oh my God. Just go to freaking work. Is it that hard? Like, maybe go against everybody else and maybe you try to get yourself in position to win a championship. Is that all I'm asking? 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll have your reaction to that next. Stillman and Company, we're live from the wholesaling studio, powered by RumbleOn.com. We're delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 1025 The Game. We're streaming on the Game Nashville app. The Titans are joining the NFLPA's groupthink and deciding not to participate in organized team activities. I was really hopeful. I'm not surprised by this. I was really hopeful, just for the record. I was hopeful that the Titans wouldn't do this so that they could be like the one team that does work out with their coaches, and then you can see the results play out on the field. But clearly, nope, we gotta negotiate. So there you go. Phone line, 615-737-1025. Trevor Matich in less than 10 minutes. He'll join us with his thoughts on the draft. Caroline, what is on the text line?
Shane from Ashland City said, you can't get up and go freaking train, but you can stand side by side, play side by side, and sit side by side during a game. What sense does that make? Let me pay you millions just so you can tell me no, you don't want to do that.
Now, the players will argue that these are voluntary workouts. They will say it's voluntary. But at the same time, I want you to voluntarily decide to be a better team. I want you to voluntarily work harder so that your team can compete for a Super Bowl. I want you to voluntarily work together and learn the camaraderie and voluntarily choose to be with your coaches. I want you to do that voluntarily. I'm sorry. See, this is where it's different. The team can't say this. Because you can't say to somebody, you can't dock somebody for doing something that's not voluntary. But I'm not the team. I don't own the team. I'm not a member of the team. I'm not paid by the team. I don't even carry water for the team. And I'm saying, I want you to want yourself to be better. I want you to get your team in the best position possible. Now, they can't make you, but I want you to do that.
Along those same lines, Joey from Gallatin said, I would understand if Jared was mad at players for not going to mandatory workouts, but don't call it voluntary and then get upset if they choose not to go.
Again, I'm not upset with the structure of it. Like, I'm not the team saying, you got to be at voluntary workouts or you're going to get cut. I'm saying this for you. I'm saying this for the fans. Like, I'm saying, look, I want you to work harder than the other teams. I do. That's how you end up winning championships. You work harder. Why is Tom Brady and the 199th pick in the draft, why is he such a success? Because he works harder than everybody else. How come Peyton Manning can sit there and diagram any play at any time and know exactly what the defense is going to do? Because he works harder than Vince Young works. Because he worked harder than Jamarcus Russell worked. He worked harder than Jay Cutler worked. I want my guys, my team, I want them to work harder, and I want them to voluntarily work harder. And the difference is unlike the team, I can complain about it when I feel like they're not doing it.
Also, similarly, Chris from Nashville says, yet players like Derrick Henry are posting on Instagram videos working out in public gyms. Like what you were saying, there is an obvious difference between Derrick Henry and other running backs in the league, other players on the Titans roster. Derrick Henry is a standout guy for a reason because he is working out and he is going the distance. Granted, his workouts are kind of strange, but he's still doing them.
I didn't care a couple of years ago. Derrick Henry missed the OTAs because I believe he was finishing up his degree at Alabama. And he didn't communicate it really well, and Mike Mularkey got really mad, and there was some drama there for a couple of days. I'm not worried about Derrick Henry. I'm not worried about Derrick Henry. I'm worried about the team. I need this just as much for the coaches as I do the players. I need Shane Bowen to coach on that field. I need Todd Downing to coach on that field. I need Jim Schwartz to coach on that field. Like, I need those players with those coaches. I need it. And I think it's... And what else? The other thing that bothers me about this is it kind of feels like what I know of the Titans players: Tannehill, Henry, Lewan, Byard, A.J. Brown. What I know of those guys is if they were just presented the choice straight up of, hey, do you want to go to Nashville and work out in Nashville and work out with the team and be on the field with the coaches? I think they'd say yes. But when the Players Association, the union that protects their rights, says, oh, we don't want to do this, now they kind of have to fall in line with everybody else. And that kind of makes me mad.
I do agree with you that this is a very pivotal time, and having with a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator, you need your team to be together. So I do agree with you in that it is a very pivotal time and very important for them to be together. I don't think it's about laziness.
I think big picture, I think it's lazy. I think big picture around the league, I think it's lazy. I think it's like one of these things, too, the COVID shield of last year we didn't do it because of COVID. Well, okay, everybody didn't do everything last year because of COVID. Okay, well, now this year we know you can do it because we saw you do it for a season. We know you can do it. They can do it in college. What happened to all the people that said the safest I feel is in this facility? What happened to those people? That I don't know. Trevor Matich joins us next, ESPN college football analyst. It seems like a trend with the 22nd pick, what the Titans are going to do. What does Trevor think of that trend? We'll get into that next. Plus, does he love the pick that everybody seems to be picking the Titans to make? We'll do that next with Trevor. Stillman and Company. We're delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company is delivered by TriStar, moving the NFL draft 9 days away. That's right, we'll have our special draft preview show Thursday night right here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Chris Sanders, TD, will be with me. But another mock draft today. This is a dueling mock draft from Mel Kiper Jr. and Todd McShay, where Mel makes the first pick, then Todd makes the second pick, and so on and so forth. And last week, Mel Kiper Jr.'s mock draft had Elijah Moore at number 22, the wide receiver out of Ole Miss, has Elijah Moore at 22. Today, Todd McShay in the Titans position at 22 picks Elijah Moore. Trevor Matich joins us now, ESPN college football analyst. Trev, another mock draft, another Elijah Moore pick. Is it just groupthink that now it feels like a lot of people are circling Elijah Moore to the Titans? Was it his great pro day that makes a lot of people think that Elijah Moore to the Titans makes sense? I don't see him in the first round in many other drafts if the Titans let the cat out of the bag. What do you think about it?
They may have. I think, Jared, that part of the reason he's starting to get a lot of luck for the Titans at 22 is because of that pro day. I mean, we see on tape Elijah Moore be able to snap off routes so quickly that college corners aren't able to follow him. I mean, he gets in and out of a break as fast as any receiver really I've seen in a long time coming out of college. But he also ran a 4.35 40. 4.35. Now, he's thought of really as a slot receiver at Ole Miss, thinking that he would catch the ball, have some space because of the way he runs his routes, and then make yards after the catch. But the fact that he's got that kind of speed tells you that he can get down the field and stretch the defense. And that's an interesting concept because he's not a big guy. He's listed at 5'9.5", about 180 pounds. And I think that's one of the reasons that people haven't mocked him in the first round until after his pro day, until recently, certainly. But, you know, he doesn't have a lot of ability to reach up to catch that ball. He doesn't have a big catch radius. But 4.35, when you get it all on the field, will scare the defense and make the safety stay deep. And so this is the kind of a guy that could be sort of a not quite as fast as Deshaun Jackson, that you can plug in and send him deep and open up stuff underneath. That's not how they use him most of the time. But to have the ability to do that means that they have a lot of scheme versatility depending on what the defense is trying to do. And if the third corner that's trying to cover him can't run with him, they can check a route and send him deep anytime they want. So it really is an interesting fit for Tennessee because of that.
Todd McShay said in his explanation that he was going back and forth between Elijah Moore and Kadarius Toney out of Florida. We know in no particular order that Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, and Devontae Smith are the top three receivers in the draft and will be well off the board before the Titans pick at 22. But, Trevor, where would you put Elijah Moore in that second group of wide receivers?
You know what? I'd have put him a little bit farther down than he is now. I've got him up higher than I did before his pro day because of that speed. I just didn't realize that he had that much high-end speed. And so I would actually put him in that next tier and near the top of that next tier. Kadarius Toney, for a lot of reasons, I love. But there's a couple of things that might keep him from being drafted ahead of Elijah Moore. One is that Elijah Moore is already a very crisp route runner. And you can see year to year to year, he got better and better at Ole Miss at running routes. So he's all ready to step into the NFL and not need a whole lot of work on the basic fundamentals of a lot of different routes. Kadarius Toney was hurt for 2 of his years, at least missed a lot of time in 2017 and 2019, I believe. Finally had a fully healthy year last year. And his routes are really ad-lib. It's sort of like Sandlot playground routes, where he's not precise with his depth and his timing and things like that. But he's able to get matched up on a guy and just, from a playground standpoint, fool him, get in turn, make him miss, and off he goes. Well, that's great in college, but in the NFL, you need to be, timing is important or your quarterback's going to get nailed. So the question with Kadarius Toney is, can he develop the crisp route running at the NFL level, or is he about as good a route runner as he's going to be? And that's the question that people will need to ask.
What do you think about the other wide receivers that are kind of in that slot? Rashad Bateman is one that a lot of people, we hear a lot of Elijah Moore. We also hear a lot of Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota. I love Bateman, and I love Rondale Moore out of Purdue. How would you compare those guys with Elijah Moore?
You know what? I love Rondale Moore. I just love him. He's only 5'7", And so he's a guy that you'd have to use in a really unique way. But much like Elijah Moore, running out of the slot and having crisp breaks out of his routes, that kind of a thing, I think Rondale Moore has a better chance to be a matchup problem than Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota. Rashad Bateman is a big, tall guy who went up and just beasted the ball away from defenders when it was coming down. Did a really good job. Here's the problem with the transition for Bateman from college to the NFL. He's not particularly sudden. He doesn't have a big burst. And he's not really a particular speedster. He's fast enough, but he builds up his speed. And then when he gets to the top of his route and he needs to make a break, he breaks, but he doesn't burst. And the problem is there are so many corners in the NFL that are going to stay with him stride for stride. And so I don't know that he's got much greater upside than he already has now. I see Elijah Moore, NFL ready now. I see Kadarius Toney as a potential great upside, but he needs to improve those routes. I don't see how Rashad Bateman gets better at the next level because he doesn't have the physical ability like those other two guys to burst and to change his speed and to hit that second gear and then to hit that third gear. He just sort of mushes through stuff, and when the ball comes down, well, he's usually better at getting it than the other guy. Well, that's nice in college, but who knows about here, you know?
Trevor Matich, ESPN college football analyst, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trev, I put myself yesterday in Dane Brugler's 7-round mock draft, and I made myself pick at every spot for the Titans, so I could only go with who was on the board. I had Elijah Moore on the board. I had Gregory Rousseau on the board out of Miami. I had Gregory Newsome II out of Northwestern, the corner, on the board, and I took Azeez Ojulari. I keep hearing either some people love Ojulari and they've got him ranked in the top 15 of the draft, and others see him as an end-of-the-first-round guy. I picked Ojulari because I think it's harder to find a pass rusher in the second round than it would be a wide receiver or a corner in this year's draft. And yet the more I read or the more I see, the more I'm starting to think there's going to be a team within the first 21 picks that likes Ojulari more or as much as I do and will take him before he gets to 22.
I agree with you. I think that's more likely, Jared. The thing about Ojulari that makes him so polarizing is his ability to go to plan B. In other words, he's got tremendous burst off the line to rush the passer or to have tackles for loss, get into the backfield. He led the SEC last year in sacks, tackles for loss, and forced fumbles. And that's because he's so quick off the line, he disrupts plays before they have the chance to get started, and he gets the quarterbacks before they expect him to be there. That's great. But it works so well that he never really developed that much of a counter to that initial move, which is burst up the field, bend low, get around the corner, which is great, but he needs that second move. I think he's got the athleticism to be able to develop that counter move and then another counter move on top of that. But you've got to trust that he can really do that. But that's one of the reasons that some teams have him graded lower. Plus, there are times when he kind of disappears. You know, you'll see him smash an offensive lineman on a running play, slide off and make the tackle. It's beautiful. And then you'll see him ooze into an offensive lineman and get completely swallowed up, and he disappears. So why is that? You know, could he do the former more, or is he average? That I think he'll be able to coach the rest of it, the counters to all that. And what you can't coach is that kind of speed. And this is and Mike Vrabel, a head coach who's defensive minded, who comes from the Patriots mindset that you take guys, find out what they do best, and create the scheme around what that guy does best, and let him do it, right? And so right off the bat, I think Ojulari will be a tremendous asset to disrupt opposing offenses in the backfield, and then they'll let him develop, and we'll see how far he can develop from there. But I'm with you. If he's there and the Titans take him at 22, it wouldn't bother me at all because they'll make the team faster, more explosive, and more athletic.
Trev, I got crushed because when I did that 7-round mock draft exercise, I didn't draft a tight end. And obviously the Titans have a hole at tight end. but I just felt like the second round was too high for Tommy Tremble or Brevin Jordan. And then Dane Brugler had them going at 73 and 74. The Titans don't pick until the 80s. And so unless they trade down at some point to get into that range or trade up at some point, I don't know when the right time to pick a tight end who could be a day one starter in this draft would be. How imperative is it that the Titans find a tight end?
They need to find one. Firkser, I think, is going to flourish. Now that Jonnu Smith is gone, I think Firkser is going to rise up and be a very good, reliable pass receiving target. But they could use another one, and they could use a guy that's a better combo of blocker and receiver. And the two guys you mentioned are the two guys I love the best in that third round place. Like Brevin Jordan out of Miami was banged up a bit last year, so I think he's going to fall a little bit farther than he should based on his talent. Talk about Tremble out of Notre Dame, who probably is the best blocking tight end coming out of the draft, but he's also a very good receiving tight end. So those guys are gone in that third round. You don't want to reach for a guy, especially you don't want to reach for a tight end. But, I like Kenny Yeboah out of Ole Miss. I mean, he's got the vertical speed to get down the field. He's a pretty good blocker, although he could be better at it. He's got some good hands, good route running, and he's raw. But he caught a lot of balls for Ole Miss, so he's got a lot of experience. And you can tell that he's got the raw natural talent to develop into a very solid tight end, and he just needs some work. But that's what you're talking about when you're drafting a tight end in the region of the third round.
Trevor Matich is our guest, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Coming up next, I talked to a college coach, and I asked him about top prospects in the draft, specifically Elijah Moore. And this coach would know. I will tell you what he told me, and we'll get Trevor's reaction to it as well. Plus, all the Mac Jones chatter. What does Trevor make of that? Trevor Lawrence had some interesting comments about his desire for football. All that's on the table. Trevor Matich is our guest, ESPN college football analyst, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Stillman & Company is delivered by TriStar Moving on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Stillman & Company is delivered by TriStar, moving the NFL draft 9 days away. Trevor Matich is our guest, ESPN college football analyst, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Okay, Trevor, there's been a lot of talk of Elijah Moore, the wide receiver out of Ole Miss, to the Titans with the 22nd pick. There's also been a lot of talk of Greg Newsome. There's been a lot of talk of Azeez Ojulari. There's been a lot of talk about different guys. So I asked a college football coach who would know. Tons of SEC experience, tons of Big Ten experience, some ACC experience as well, and I don't know where else this coach has coached. But I asked this college football coach what he thought about Elijah Moore. Specifically, Cole Kublik came on our show, SEC Network analyst, and compared Elijah Moore to Antonio Brown. I asked the coach, what do you think of it? The coach said that's not a bad comparison. But I kind of agree that Rondale Moore and Amari Rodgers will all be in that 35 to 70 range. Don't pass up on Azeez Ojulari or Jalen Phillips for Elijah Moore. What do you think of that, Trevor?
Yeah, I would agree with that. This draft has an interesting kind of comparison between offensive tackle and wide receiver. There's a lot of them available. But after about the first 4 or 5, everybody's about the same in that you're going to have to pick what upside you like and what potential downside you can live with, what risks you can live with. And so when you talk about Ojulari, there's, you know what he can do from an athletic standpoint. And while you can teach guys and develop guys as you get them farther down the draft, the physical tools that Ojulari has means that his upside is vastly greater than most of the guys that would be drafted below him. Now, that's not to say he'll reach that upside, but the potential is there. I think the floor for Ojulari is also pretty high. In other words, I don't think he'll be a bust of a player because of his speed and athleticism. You can always find a way to use that, even if it's just to attack. Just, Azeez, go downhill and attack. Okay, he'll disrupt things all over the place. And if you can't do anything else, that floor is still really good. I think the floor under Elijah Moore at wide receiver is also pretty high. And the ceiling is pretty high. He'll need to overcome dealing with taller, longer, rangier corners in the NFL than he had to face in the SEC. And we'll see how he can do that because he's only a little over 5'9". But I think both of those guys have a high floor, a high floor and a high ceiling. Now you start to get lower in terms of receivers, pass rushers, guys like that. That floor drops and the ceiling drops. And so, if you're ever in doubt, go with the guy with the better athleticism.
Trev, how important is offensive line in this draft for the Titans? I say that because nobody looks at it as a total need, but this time last year, the Titans were probably in a better position because they knew they had Dennis Kelly, who could play right tackle. They've got Kendall Lamb, who's kind of a backup they're going to put out there, or Ty Sambrilo, who's kind of a backup they're going to put out there. Ben Jones is up at the end of the year at center. Roger Saffold carries a huge cap hit into next year. Taylor Lewan, who's missed half of the games over the last 2 years, also carries a huge cap hit next year that the Titans could get themselves out of. Last year, clearly tackle mattered to them because they used a first-round pick on it. How big do you think offensive line is for the Titans this year in this draft?
No, it's big because for the Titans, Jared, and you see this, and we've talked about this, that their mentality, the whole thing starts with the offensive line, not just being able to road grade holes in the running game, but to set the physical tone. Not for the running game, for the defense, because they face them in practice all the time, is to set that tone, and they need that. That's one of the reasons that losing Jack Conklin was such a big deal. I mean, the guy was a road grader, but he also was nasty, and that spreads in your offensive line room and into the rest of the team. And so Taylor Lewan is another guy like that. The problem is cost. What do you do about cost? And there's some really intriguing prospects in terms of this draft for offensive line, both at guard and at tackle. And if they hit on some of those guys, they could have those developmental guys that maybe a year or two from now could step in and give them exactly what the Titans need. A guy like Walker Little out of Stanford, for example, we've talked about him a little bit. He's a left tackle. He's 6'7", about 310. Didn't play last year. He opted out. 2019, he got hurt in the first game. Before that, he was a guy that was thought of as so athletic that he'd be one of the first tackles taken when he came out in the draft. Well, right now he's a question mark because of limited play. But he's not a guy that you see crush people. I mean, you do not see him, just annihilate people. You don't want a technician necessarily to be your long-term starter on this team, right? And so I think there are some guys, kid out of Michigan, kid out of Oklahoma State, that are the nasty attitude that you would need. And because after the first few guys, Panay Sewell, Christian Darrisaw, those guys, there are guys that are going to have that attitude that you then need to decide, can you coach them up to make sure they can pass protect well enough and make sure that their run blocking technique is good enough, right? And so that's one thing I think as a Titans fan I'm looking for. I don't want a guy in the O-line who's a technician. I want a guy who has good technique and he's an intimidator. And that's important because right now, you're right. Right now, the O-line looks pretty good. Right tackle, we'll see. But the rest of the line looks solid. But in 2 years, you may have 3 or even 4 new guys up there.
Trevor Matich is our guest. I have a theory, Trevor, and you may know something about this with your Washington background. The media that covers the NFL can't fathom the idea of Mac Jones at 3 to San Francisco. But the more I think about it, the more I think about the fact that I'm not sure that Shanahan's system, I'm not sure that those coaches want quarterbacks that can run. Justin Fields can run and is more athletic, and Trey Lance, we know, is more athletic than Mac Jones. Mac Jones' biggest knock is that he's not athletic. But then I thought about it. In the Shanahan system, going all the way back to Mike, whether it's Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur in Green Bay, whether it's Sean McVay, Arthur Smith, or now, you go all throughout. To me, there have been 2 guys that can run at quarterback. RG3 in Washington and Mariota here under LaFleur and Arthur Smith for half a season. I think they want the statue in the pocket. All those guys, Matt Ryan's a statue. Jared Goff is a statue. Ryan Tannehill can move a little bit, but he's certainly not Mariota. He's certainly not Justin Fields. Kirk Cousins is a statue compared to RG3. I think that's what the Shanahan system wants, or at least that's what Shanahan in San Francisco thinks, and that's why I think that it's going to be Mac Jones at number 3, even though I wouldn't take Mac Jones with the 3rd overall pick. What do you think of that?
What I think is that, and this is sort of a pie in the sky discussion, right? Because what if Tom Brady could run like Lamar Jackson? Mm-hmm. Yay! Tom Brady's not great because he can't run and he's a statue in the pocket. He's great because he's great in the pocket and because he has to be. Matt Ryan, same way. Of Atlanta, you've got Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, who's great in the pocket, but he's also got a lot more mobility. And Patrick Mahomes is state-of-the-art. That is the best combination of both a passer and a runner that we see in the NFL right now. And so do you want a guy in the Shanahan system who is a statue? No. But first you have to have a guy who can make the decisions and distribute well. It is more important for Shanahan's system that a quarterback do that than that he run at the expense of being able to make the decisions. And so I really think San Francisco should and will go with Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields has the physical ability to do everything that Mac Jones can do, except with a stronger arm. You'll have to decide on the board in the interview process on Zoom whether he can, whether he's got a good base of understanding to start from learning the NFL systems and NFL defenses. But, Mac Jones is a superstar on the board. I mean, a superstar. Where is Justin Fields? I don't know. I just don't know. I just haven't heard. But if he is able to make those decisions to the satisfaction of Shanahan, then his ability to run on top of it now gives him, a Patrick Mahomes style. I'm not saying he's Mahomes, but a Patrick Mahomes style threat to defenses. And I kind of think that's what they're looking for. But if I were them, if I'm satisfied with the interviews on the board with Justin Fields, I'd take him over Mac Jones in a heartbeat because of what Shanahan was able to do with RG3. I'm sure he'd love to be able to replicate RG3. The problem with RG3, lots of problems with RG3. But one is that he never developed, after that first year, the ability to mentally adjust to what defenses were doing fast enough. In other words, he could tell you on the whiteboard what he needed to do, RG3 now. But when he got into the game, he was always a half a second or a second slow in making that decision. It's not because he's not smart. He's super smart. He just didn't have that ability. And so that to me is what Shanahan wants. And so, yeah, we all want Superman to be our quarterback, right? But I think in Justin Fields, you might have a chance to have him.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. I wouldn't take Mac Jones third. I'm just telling you, I think they're going to take Mac Jones third. And I think they got in front of Atlanta, Arthur Smith, a Shanahan-style offensive coordinator with Matt Ryan as his quarterback, and we know that Matt Ryan's not getting any younger, and we know that Kyle Shanahan likes Matt Ryan. I think they got in front of Atlanta for a reason. That's just my take. Trevor Matich. Trev, as always, we will talk to you next week. We'll have 2 days before the draft when we talk to you next week, and I know you will be brushing up on tape because, quite frankly, I envision that that's pretty much all you do anyways, is watch tape and 90 Day Fiancé.
I do. I watch tape, and I explain to my wife why I just watch tape. So that's what I do. I look forward to seeing you next week. It's getting close.
Yep, always good to talk to you, Trev.
Thanks, Jim.
Yep, Trevor Matich, ESPN college football analyst, brought to you by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Todd McShay and Mel Kiper Jr. had a nice little exercise today where they did a dueling mock draft. Mel makes one pick, Todd makes the next pick. I've decided Caroline Fenton is going to step into the ring. We're going to see how she does. My guess is her draft will not be as good as mine. If I just modestly had to take a guess, I would say it's not going to be as good as mine. But we will see. Next, Stillman & Company right here. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game. By the way, speaking of the NFL draft, we got the best draft coverage. TD, Chris Sanders, Mark Howard. That's right. Don't miss Nashville's best draft coverage on Thursday, April 29th and Friday, April 30th on ESPN 102.5 The Game, presented by Founders Brewery, Apple Collision Centers, Freedom Tire Guys, and MTGRT.com, your live and local mortgage expert. Be sure to join us on site as we'll be broadcasting live on Thursday, April 29th from 3rd and Home, Germantown's Bar with a Ballpark, and on Friday, April 30th from Boom Boss Craft Pizza and Tap House in East Nashville. And again, I don't think you can find better Titans experts than those three, but it will be good for us to have Mark Howard all night breaking down the draft with us. We are so excited. Stillman & Company, we're delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company is delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 1025 The Game. It is just mock draft season to a T. Mel Kiper Jr. and Todd McShay had a dueling mock draft where Mel made one pick, then Todd made the next, and they went so-and-so. So I saw this. I said, you know what? We're going to see if Caroline can do this. We're going to see if she can put together a good draft.
Well, if I can do it.
We're going to see if you can put together a good draft.
You're underestimating me.
Well, how are we supposed to know? Now's going to be the first time. Let me start off, though, first by saying this. As many people well know, Derek Chauvin in Minnesota, the officer who killed George Floyd, was found guilty on all 3 charges he was facing. I'm not one to sit here and make this something more than a sports show, because that's what it is. But if you don't think that the cultural growth of the country is rooted in sports, you don't understand sports. You don't understand Muhammad Ali. You don't understand Jackie Robinson. You don't understand Auburn and Alabama football. The truth is in this country, slights against African American people have happened for far too long. And it may not be as bad as it once was. But that doesn't mean that we can't do what's right, we can't believe in what's right, and we can't all be together and stand up for justice. Today, it feels like justice was served. And I'm glad that we can celebrate as a society, not that justice was served, not that someone's going to jail, but that perhaps we as a society are starting to make a little bit of progress. Because it's been a rough couple of years. But I think anytime you look in the history of the country, especially surrounding sports, you've needed a rough patch in order for growth. And I hope that's the path we're on. So I just wanted to say that. And now to the dueling mock draft. So I'm going to pick first because, I just want to. So, Ian, if you will, with the number 1 pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars are on the clock. I'm going to take Trevor Lawrence.
Shocker.
I'm going Trevor Lawrence out of Clemson. I'll just leave it at that.
Groundbreaking.
His comments do not concern me. I will go Trevor Lawrence, number 1. You're now on the clock. The Jets.
And with the number 2 pick in the Jared and Caroline draft, the Jets select Zach Wilson. That's their dude. There's really no interpretation there.
Ooh, goody. I get to pick third. This is why I wanted this. I want to be able to pick third. I'm picking Mac Jones. And here's why I'm picking Mac Jones. Because the Shanahan system doesn't want mobile quarterbacks. They don't want mobile quarterbacks. The most mobile they want is Jake Plummer. The most mobile they want is Ryan Tannehill. They don't want mobile quarterbacks. They want Matt Ryan. And a lot of people say that Mac Jones is kind of like Matt Ryan. I don't know if I believe it, but they say it. So I'm going Mac Jones here with the 3rd pick.
Fourth pick, Falcons have it. And going off of that same point, the Shanahan system, which Arthur Smith, new head coach of the Falcons, runs.
True.
So a lot of people are mocking Justin Fields to go to the Falcons. Justin Fields does not fit that system. Atlanta needs a tight end. Kyle Pitts is the absolute best tight end in this draft. So in the number 4 pick, I'm taking Kyle Pitts. He can block. He's fast. He's big. He's tough to cover. And if he's available and you need a tight end, you take him while you can.
I get the Bengals at 5. I'm taking Jamar Chase out of LSU. I think he's the second best player. I think he's the second best player in the draft behind Trevor Lawrence. And even though the Bengals will screw it up because they're the Bengals, I'm taking Jamar Chase out of LSU.
Dang it.
That's who you want to take at 6, isn't it?
That's why I wanted to take it 6, because I think the Bengals should take Penei Sewell. So, with the number 6 pick, I'm protecting my quarterback that I drafted last year if I'm the Dolphins. So I am going to take Penei Sewell at 6.
Didn't they just take a tackle?
They did.
Anywho,
I just don't think that Miami's line is complete.
I'm Detroit at 7. I don't get to make I don't get to make trades like Mel and Todd made a trade here. I'm Detroit at 7, and I'm going to go with Devontae Smith. I think that if I'm Detroit, the way I want to play this is I want Jared Goff to be my quarterback, and I want to give him some help. and I want to be able to use those Rams picks, not for quarterbacks in the future. So I'm going to go Devontae Smith with the 7th overall pick to the Detroit Lions.
Eighth overall pick, Carolina. They need an offensive tackle. I'm taking Rashawn Slater out of Northwestern.
I'm waiting for the music. Oh, there we go. I'm the Denver Broncos. They got no quarterback, and you just gave me Justin Fields. Because right now, the Denver Broncos, I like Drew Lock fine. I think Drew Lock is better than he gets credit for. I think that Denver would love to trade up and get a quarterback. I think Denver wanted Deshaun Watson. Instead, they sit at 9 and get Justin Fields. That will never happen in the real draft. But I'm going Justin Fields at 9.
Number 10, I've got Dallas. I'm taking Patrick Surtain, corner out of Alabama. They need a corner. He's the best corner available.
New York Giants have the 11th overall pick in the draft. The New York Giants are going to take the best defensive player in this draft, Micah Parsons, the linebacker out of Penn State. He is a playmaker. He is a baller. I'm not going to say he's Ray Lewis, but he's a baller. At 11, the Giants go defense because they need it, and they go Micah Parsons.
I'm Philly at 12. Philly needs a wide receiver bad.
Philly needs everything.
Philly needs everything, but if the Heisman Trophy winner is available, you take him if you need him. So I'm taking Devontae Smith at
He's already
number
off
12.
the board. I already took him.
Oh, when did you take him?
Detroit.
Dang it. Then I'll take Jalen Waddle, next best available wide receiver.
The slot receiver. Okay, 13, the Chargers. I love the Chargers team. I do. I think the Chargers take J.C. Horn. That's who I would take at number 12, number 13, excuse me. I think it's a little up there, but I think they look at J.C. Horn as the kind of guy who on one play can match up with Tyreek Hill and on another match up with Travis Kelce. And that's what you have to have in that division. Everyone will talk about helping Herbert, and I understand it, but I think you got to look at the offenses you got to play. Mainly Mahomes in Kansas City, J.C. Horn at 13 to the Chargers.
Now, the Vikings need help on both sides of the ball. They need help on their offensive line. They need help on their defensive line. But if you have that many glaring needs on one side, I'm taking Elijah Vera-Tucker. He can play an offensive line position. He can also play the guard position. He's an incredibly versatile lineman, so I'm taking him 14 to the Vikings.
So I got the Patriots at 15. Trey Lance, the quarterback out of North Dakota State. Why? Because Cam Newton sucks. Trey Lance, 15 overall to the Patriots. Again, I don't think this will ever happen in the real draft, but I'm going with Cam.
Now, you said you wanted to go J.C. Horn, but did you take him to the Chargers?
I did take him to the Chargers.
Well, then I'm going to take the next available corner because the Cardinals need a corner bad, and they're going to be facing against. And when you're looking at the NFC West wide receivers, you've got a pretty tall order. So I'm going to take the next best available, in my opinion, the next best available corner, and Caleb Farley, Virginia Tech corner, to the Cardinals.
They do need it. So the Raiders sit at 17. You talk about another team that needs everything. I'm going to take Christian Darrisaw, the offensive tackle out of Virginia Tech. He's probably a top 15 pick. I doubt he makes it all the way to 17, but he has on this board. So if I'm the Raiders, I'm going there because they are totally rebuilding their offensive line, and I think you need a right tackle, Colton Miller on the left. I think you need a right tackle for Derek Carr and for Josh Jacobs. So that's Darrisaw out of Virginia Tech.
The Dolphins need a linebacker, and I think I'm going to take Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah out of Notre Dame. Not addressing their wide receiver needs in here, but that's okay. We're gonna drop down to the second round for that one, since our guy was taken, number 5 to the Bengals. Marches.
The Washington football team is on the clock here at 19, and if I'm the Washington football team, I'm going outside the box. I'm taking running back. I'm going Najee Harris of Alabama with the 19th overall pick because I think ultimately they would love to get a quarterback, but they're not going to be able to. So go out and get a running back. I think if Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, these Alabama running backs, there used to be a saying that they couldn't play in the league. Clearly they can. Alvin Kamara can play in the league. These guys can play. Najee Harris is a bad boy. He goes at 19 to the Washington football team.
The Bears just need some help on offense. So, you could take a running back here, you could take a quarterback here, but I'm going to go with Kadarius Toney out of Florida to Chicago.
At 20?
At 20.
It's a hot take. The Indianapolis Colts have got to rebuild their defensive line. Why? Because, quite frankly, they need some help next to DeForest Buckner on that line. I think they go Azeez Ojulari at 21. I think they play him as kind of a hybrid, linebacker, not so. I think Indianapolis goes Ojulari at 21 out of Georgia. Oh, big pick here. Big pick.
And that's who I wanted to pick.
At 22 for the Titans.
At 22 for the Titans. I have stressed this so hard that the Titans need to go defense in this draft in the first round. I totally understand why people want Elijah Moore. I get it. I see it. I wanted to go Azeez Ojulari, but I'm going to go with what is likely, what a lot of people think is the best edge rusher in this draft. So I'm going to go Jalen Phillips, defensive end out of Miami.
I gave you that option. The Jets are at 23. Robert Saleh runs that San Francisco-style defense. They need good defensive linemen. I'll go Kwity Paye out of Michigan, kind of a defensive end-type player. I think that's where they go for the Jets, Jets.
Now, you took my running back. So since Pittsburgh just lost their top running back in James Conner, I'm going to go Travis Etienne, running back out of Clemson.
Man, you are a need person. You draft for need.
I do draft for need. I think the Steelers don't have a great run game. They lost their number one running back. I say go with what you need there.
I am sitting here now with the Jacksonville Jaguars with the 25th pick. And I am going all the way up because there are still some players left on the board from early in this draft that we didn't necessarily take. And I am going to go up and take the best safety on the board, Trevon Moehrig out of TCU. A lot of people think he's going to be a top 15 pick. I'm going to take him with a value pick at Jacksonville at 25.
The Browns have the 26th pick. They need some help on defense. They have our friend Jadeveon Clowney, but I think they're going to need even more assistance on defense. So is Kwity Paye available on the board?
No, he's not. I took him.
Bear with me here.
Gotta be ready on the draft.
I know. I'm sorry.
Pass your card back.
I'm not a very good GM. Let's see what we haven't taken here.
I'm just sitting
This is
here
hard.
with my
I don't want to be
card
picking 26 in the draft. I'm glad that I'm not a GM.
Oh.
I am going to take. Can I take Christian Barmore?
You can.
I'm going to take Christian Barmore.
Ravens at 27. I'm going Elijah Moore. Wide receiver, they need it. He's there. 27. Everybody sold me on Elijah Moore. Ravens at 27, take him.
Who Dat Nation, the Saints pick at 28. There was not a lot of depth in that wide receiver position this past year. Yeah, you have Mike Thomas, but you need to add a little bit of depth on the wide receiver front. Did you take Rashad Bateman?
I did not.
I'm going to take Rashad Bateman to New Orleans.
29, the Green Bay Packers. They lose Pro Bowl center Corey Linsley. I go Landon Dickerson, the the Pro Bowl center. The center out of Alabama, Landon Dickerson, at 29 to Green Bay.
The Bills had a super explosive offense, but they just need a little bit of help on defense. So I'm going to select Asante Samuel Jr. How about that defensive bit in Buffalo?
Kansas City Chiefs, they need tackles. Sitting there on the board, Tevin Jenkins out of Oklahoma State. I think he is an eventual long-term option at tackle. They're paying their guards a bunch of money, so you need cheap tackles. Kansas City goes Tevin Jenkins at 31. Defending Super Bowl champs?
Defending Super Bowl champs. It just doesn't feel like the Bucs have a ton of needs, but I'm just going to take the best available. Who do we have available here?
The best available would be Jamin Davis, the linebacker out of Kentucky.
But I mean, the Bucs
you've already got Devin
You've
White,
got
Levante
Devin White.
David.
You have no needs at linebacker there. You can take an offensive tackle.
But you're talking about perhaps the 10th best player, 15th best player in the draft with the 32nd pick.
I mean, go ahead and go for it.
And Levante David isn't young.
Right. Devin White is young, but you're going to have future needs come up and, knock on wood, injuries. So let's snag a linebacker.
Jamin Davis,
32nd pick. Welcome to Tampa Bay.
Ian, what did you think of Caroline's mock draft?
I thought both of y'all had some good picks in there.
I thought I had some great picks. I'm just modestly keeping it real. We'll get your reaction. 615-737-1025. It made my day. Watching Caroline struggle with that Browns pick. It really did. 615-737-1025. We're live from the Wholesaling Studio, powered by RumbleOn.com. It's ESPN 1025 The Game. So we just had dueling mock drafts. Caroline's first experience kind of getting held up on the radio. I was proud of you.
Thank you very much.
But we went pretty long, so we got Hal Gill coming up. So unless you got a thought, to the phones.
To the phones.
Phones, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Dalton up next on Cincinnati with the 5th pick. Go ahead, Dalton.
Hey, Jared. I love the show. That
Thank
pick is a grand slam home run. The Bengals have always had really good receivers. Pickens, Collinsworth, Chad, TJ, AJ. A lot of people want the lineman. I don't want it. Jamar Chase is like a real X factor, and Cincinnati taking him, putting him back with Joe Burrow, they're going to look great in those new uniforms.
Thank you for your call, Dalton. By the way, I don't mind the Bengals' new uniforms. Let me say this. The reason, so I went with Chase over Penei Sewell. Did we draft Penei Sewell?
Yeah, I did, to the Dolphins.
Okay. So I went Chase over Sewell at 5. And the only reason I did, I think, if you're drafting for need, I'm not a need guy. If you're drafting for need, I think you go Sewell because you've got Tyler Boyd, you've got T. Higgins, but I take the best player. And to me, the draft goes like this. Trevor Lawrence 1, Jamar Chase 2, Kyle Pitts 3. That's how I look at this draft. And I don't forget what Jamar Chase did in 2019 because I think there's a lot of people who kind of do that are like, just to put this in perspective, last year, Justin Jefferson was the rookie of the year, maybe a top 10 receiver in the league. Stephon Diggs, whose spot he took, went on to Buffalo, had an MVP-level season at the receiver position, and you can argue that Justin Jefferson was just as good in Minnesota.
Well,
and Jamar Chase was better than Justin Jefferson at LSU.
Nobody in this room is going to forget about what Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow did at LSU if it's not me. I would remember that more than anyone, and nobody wants Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow together more than I do as an LSU alum. I would love to see that more than anything. But Joe Burrow cannot throw the ball to Jamar Chase if Joe Burrow is on the ground.
Sure, but I can worry about that later. I'm getting the best players. If I have the best players, then ultimately, I can go get a tackle in the second round. I can trade back at some point, add a tackle in the third round. I can get guys. Joe Burrow might be on the ground this year, but I got the best player. I got the best player in the last 2 drafts. That's the way I would look at it. Hal Gill, the Predators are apparently red freaking hot. Hal Gill will join us coming up next. What does Hal think about this hot streak? Is he like me and believes, hey, it's good, or is Hal a big believer? We'll check in. Hal Gill will join us coming up next. Hey, Pro Golf is coming to Nashville this May with the Simmons Bank Open. Text the word golf now to 615-737-1025 for a chance to win a weekend pass for 4 to enjoy the event in style, including food and drink, plus a Predators gift pack, including polo shirt, golf balls, and umbrella. Text golf right now to 615-737-1025 to enter to win. Hal Gill next. Stillman and Company. It's ESPN 1025, The Game. The Predators got back on track. Big win last night against Chicago. They needed it because Dallas pulled another one out of their rear ends against Detroit. They've got 3 more with Detroit. The Predators have 2 more with the Blackhawks. It is almost like a horse race down the stretch they go. We'll see. Hal Gill joins us now on the program, Preds radio analyst. Hal, presented by Duncan, featuring their new location in Belmead and TriStar Moving, TriStar Movers with 5-star service. Hal, I am torn with how I feel about the Predators, and here's why. Because on one hand, I looked at the games against Carolina where I thought they played hard. I thought they got into it, but Carolina was just too freaking good. Nothing against the Predators. I was just looking at Carolina thinking, man, if this is a playoff series, that's going to be a quick exit because Carolina is freaking good. But then on the other hand, as soon as they play somebody worse, they get right back to their winning ways. So it looks like all the good things we like are continuing. I just don't know how they can do against the good teams after what I saw this weekend. What do you think?
Well, I partly agree with you. It's kind of trying to figure out what this team is. Do they have a chance to do it? Obviously, you get them a little bit healthier, then you throw in Tolvanen and Forsberg out there. I think you're going to see it. Obviously, you see a difference in the power play, which makes a big difference in games. But it was interesting talking to John Hines. He kind of was alluding to the fact that you want to go out and correct everything you did wrong against Carolina and make it right. But at the same time, you do have to tip your hat to a good team that goes out and is firing on all cylinders. So I was really impressed with Carolina. That's as good a team as I've seen play, and they were really tough to stop. And that being said, I feel like the Preds were in that game. In large part, you can say, oh, Juice was awesome. Saros was fantastic. And he kept in it. But I felt like they could compete if they just clean up their game. And then, anything can happen once you clean up your game. And so they cleaned up their game, a much better game against Chicago, and they got results. But it's really going to come down to what they can do against the big teams that aren't going to give them much. And you have to be willing to battle it out with those guys, where Chicago, there's some plays that they kind of gave the Preds, and it's a lot easier to win when you're given a few things.
How would you have felt as a player, knowing that Carolina or Tampa Bay is a likely first-round opponent if you make the playoffs? Does that factor in your mind at all, like the measuring stick element of what we saw this weekend?
Well, I do think there's a certain respect or fear. I call it a good fear. You want to fear a team that you're playing against. You want to be a little bit scared to get embarrassed. And so, anytime you take a great team, like Tampa, you're really up and down the line. Tampa, Florida, and Carolina are all good teams. So you have to be a little bit afraid. You have to have a ton of respect for them. But at the same time, are they beatable? Absolutely. You put them into a playoff series, and although it seems like this whole season has kind of been a playoff series after playoff series, and you've got 3 games against Chicago, this certainly feels like a series. But when you get into a 7-game series, anything can happen, and you can set the tone and change games. You can change the momentum by a win, and that's kind of what they're looking to do. And I think the work that they've done in kind of solidifying their all-around game, I think that could pay off in the playoffs. But we have to get there first, right?
Hal Gill's our guest. Hal, you've been on some really good teams. You've won a cup before. It almost feels like the way things have happened the last 4 years with the trip to the Stanley Cup final, the President's Trophy, even that 2019 year when they lost in the first round to Dallas, everything was about the cup. Or like, hey, if you're going to compete for the cup, you got to be able to do this, that, or the other. Right now, I don't think the Predators have a team that can compete for the cup. And I think we learned that this weekend because I think Carolina is, I'm with you. I walked out of that series thinking, man, they are freaking good. I wasn't mad at the Predators. I was just looking at Carolina saying, hey, that's how it's done. But, in hockey, everybody can't win the trophy every year. And some years you're playoff caliber. Some years you're But for some reason, I personally, Hal, have a hard time getting out of the mindset that our expectation level should be trying to win the cup. How do you assess the real expectation level of a team like that?
You know what? The whole thing is, to quote you, the Predators stink, and they stunk, and they were awful. They had a bad team not too long ago. It was 2 months ago. They were not good, and they've turned it around. And so you look at Carolina, and you say, wow, that's the best. It could go south quick. And that's the hard part about hockey is that you can change your stars pretty quick. And so I do think the Preds are tracking the right way, and they're doing all the right things. Carolina obviously was at the top of their game when the Preds played them, but that can all turn around. So, once you get in, and I know you hate to hear this, but if you get into the dance, anything can happen. And so if you get on a roll and you match up well against the team and you get a couple bounces, and, it could be your power play that lights off. It could be penalty kill that gets the job done. It could be your fourth liners that go out, change the game, and turn the momentum around in a series. There's so many things that go on during a series that I hate to keep saying it, but anything can happen. So the hard part is getting to that opportunity, and then the fun part is going through and battling it out.
Hal Gill, our guest, presented by Duncan, featuring their new location in Belmead, TriStar Moving, TriStar Movers with 5-star service. Hal, I'm kind of a skeptical sports fan. I don't know if you've noticed this about me. I can be
you don't say.
I can be a little pessimistic sometimes. And I look at the Chicago series. Whatever you want to call it. I look at the Chicago series. The Predators are 6-0 this year against Chicago. I mean, really have played. I said yesterday before that Chicago, even though they had lost all 5 matchups previously with the Predators, Chicago could tell themselves that they've outplayed the Predators in those 5 games. Last night, the Predators totally outplayed Chicago. But I just am so skeptical of the idea that Chicago is not a terrible team. The Predators, sweeping them is going to be really freaking hard. And I just went into this week saying, I just don't know if it's a fair expectation to say win 3 games, knowing that Chicago is playing with their season on the line. Then I saw last night, and I thought maybe they can. What do you make of these 2 games on the road at the United Center, knowing Chicago right now has a 6% chance of making the playoffs? And I'm guessing it's almost non-existent if they lose these 2 against the Preds.
Yeah, well, that's the difference between you and an athlete, right? An athlete says, I got to go out and win my first shift, and I got to go have a good practice and be ready for the next game, and you take it one at a time. You love to look ahead and say, all right, can they sweep this series? What are the percentages? And you're crunching your numbers, and you're thinking it over in your head. These guys are going to go out and battle one game at a time, and that's really what they're looking at. If you get caught up looking down the stretch, and hey, listen, Chicago, I give them a ton of credit because they were a disaster. Taves was out, and then Kirby Dach gets injured. It was like they were getting rid of everyone. It was just a miserable off season, and they put up a stink for a long time. They had some good hockey they were playing. I don't think they're a great team, but they have a bright young future with Suter, with Doc. There's good players that are coming through, and obviously DeBrincat, that kid can play. So there's a bright future there, but, I don't think you sleep on this team. I think the Preds can certainly win all these games that they play against them, but they know that they can't take anything for granted. They got to go out and do the work in order to win, and it's been proven. If you go to sleep and you take 5 minutes off, there are good players out there that'll make you pay for it. So the Preds know that. The hard part for the Preds is that every game's a playoff game right now, and every game is huge. I got to be honest with you, it's exhausting. These guys are in a battle every night, and so I have a ton of respect for the effort that they're giving night in and night out right now.
I'll say this, they may make it to the playoffs and get beaten 5 games by Tampa or Carolina, but it is kind of fun, right? Like this playoff chase down the stretch, it's kind of fun. It's every game matters. It's not when they won the President's Trophy, every game mattered because you wanted to be in first place. But I'm not sure it felt like this where, these Chicago games, these are big freaking games, Hal.
Yeah, that's and it's funny, isn't that you nail on the head? I'm proud of you, by the way. You're embracing the grind. I know that was their slogan last year, but it is a battle. And I've been on both sides of it where you're battling every night, and I've been on the teams where you just can't seem to lose and you just roll through. More often than not, the battle-tested team puts up a stink in the playoffs, and that's what makes it so much fun is you're fighting so hard to get in there. Maybe you didn't expect to be into the playoffs, and then you have that level of excitement, and you lose that expectation. How many times have we seen the Preds with just, we expect to get into the finals, and it's not that easy. And a lot of teams have proven us the Preds wrong. And so it'd be nice if the Preds can go in with a little chip on their shoulder this year and get in and prove everyone else wrong. And they've been the victim the last few years. Now they can go and get it done themselves. So it is exciting. And I think that's the mentality that you have to have is this is fun. This is playoff hockey leading up to the playoffs, so to speak. So this is what guys play for, and this is why the guys in the locker room are going to give everything they got.
Hal Gill, he'll be on the call tomorrow night. Special start 6 o'clock, and he'll be on the call Friday night. Harold, appreciate it.
Hey, Jared, you were really well-behaved today, and I appreciate you for that.
You know what? I had a take.
Thank you.
I had a take earlier today that I think you would appreciate,
Nope. Your time's up, buddy.
I said you would appreciate it.
I just said you were well-behaved. Don't ruin it.
There's probably some truth to that.
You're like
Hal
my
Gill,
9-year-old son. I have to, praise you for your good behavior.
But I won't be as tall
so
as him.
hopefully you'll do it again.
We'll see. We'll see in that regard. Hal Gill, as always, presented by Duncan, featuring their new location in Belmead and TriStar Moving, TriStar Movers with 5-star service. Hal, appreciate it.
Thank you, Jared. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Hal Gill joining us on the program. And, I could have gotten into it with Hal. I could have been like, clearly they lost to Carolina. Maybe they should have sold at the deadline. But I was like, that's rear view mirror. I'm windshield,
Are you? You're turning over a new leaf all of a sudden.
No. Just because I smashed you in the dueling mock draft does not mean that,
All right, calm down over there.
I'm just saying.
Your head's not going to fit through the doorway.
That left the station a long time ago. Carolines coming up next. Stillman and Company right here, ESPN 102.5 The Game. Free beer Friday. I hear everybody likes free beer, and we're giving away on Fridays. Tune in all day Friday for your chance to win a $25 gift card from Bavarian Beer House located at the Opry Mills Mall. Stillman and Company, delivered by TriStar Moving. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company. Everybody seems to love our new gambling segment. It is called Caroline's, where Caroline throws out a bunch of garbage on NBA games, and I just take her to the cleaners. It's time for Caroline's.
Get in on the action. Put the money on the mahogany. What's on tap on the sports books? It's time to break it all down with Caroline's. Here on Stillman and Company.
On ESPN.
102.5 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
Okay, Caroline.
I'm going to save you having to sit through my NBA games. We've been doing a lot of hockey games recently, so I decided to pick 2 baseball games. First up, we've got Cardinals-Nationals, Cardinals money line. Adam Wainwright is on the mound for the Cardinals.
Okay. He's an old peepop.
He is an old peepop. He's a vet, but Patrick Corbin is on the mound for the Nationals, and he is just kind of, in your word, sucks. He is over 21 ERA. He gave up 10 runs in 2 innings last week to the Diamondbacks, and the Diamondbacks are no World Series contender at this point. And the Cardinals are just better on the road. They average more runs on the road, and they scored 11 runs in the first 5 innings in yesterday's game against the Nationals. I'm picking the Cards on this one.
I'm going to go with the Cardinals, too. Juan Soto just got placed on the 10-day IL, and he's the best player on the Nationals. And I also think that left-handed pitcher Patrick Corbin struggling with control. Paul Goldschmidt's a right-handed hitter. Nolan Arenado is a right-handed hitter. I think that I'd much rather
hitters.
2 heavy right-handed power bats. I think I will take the Cardinals over the Nationals.
Look at you becoming a St. Louis homer. Is that for me?
No, they're pitching a guy who sucks.
I don't know. I like to think that it's for me. Mets-Cubs, taking the Mets money line. I read an ESPN article this morning that referenced a scout that called the Cubs offense recently almost mind-boggling because it is so bad. The Cubs have a team batting average of like 170 something. They have 4 players hitting over 200. The Cubs offense, in your word, sucks.
So I did see the Cubs this weekend because they played the Braves. And I saw, I think Friday, I watched on the iPad while I was hosting the show, so I couldn't totally keep up with it. Saturday, the Cubs exploded for 14 runs on the Braves. Sunday, they got their rear end spanked. They gave up 4 home runs in the first inning. The Cubs freaking suck, man.
The Cubs are not great.
They suck. Their pitching is trash. Like, this is a team that just, like, I know that 2016 was a long time ago. I mean, the Predators spent the whole year until the last month stinking it up, and they were in the Cup final in 2017. So the Cubs won their World Series in 2016. Mm-hmm. But, like, when they won that World Series in 2016, I thought those were guys that, you know, would one day, you know, this would be like a long thing. Like, they were young guys, and they're all still there. And they freaking suck. But the Mets suck, too. Who's pitching for the Mets today?
Taijuan Walker.
I'm going to take the Cubs. I think the Cubs got so embarrassed. Game's on ESPN, by the way. I think they got so embarrassed Sunday night. I think the Cubs will win today because I don't believe in the Mets. I'm not a Mets believer.
And if you're going to take anything as well, I would also take the under on this game. You know, both the pitchers are okay. They're all right. But with the Cubs.
Who's pitching for the Cubs?
Jake Arrieta.
2016, he was okay.
It's 2021.
5 years later. 5 years is a long time in pro sports.
He's not terrible. He has an ERA a little over 3. Don't hate it.
It's like one start.
3. I think this is 3rd start.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm still going with the Cubs.
Okay.
And those are Carolines. So now I feel bad because, oh no, you picked the Mets.
I picked the Mets money line.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So now I feel a little bit better about all that.
We'll just pool our money together for the Cardinals money line, and we'll do something fun.
Watch, the Nationals are going to win now. I'm just saying. That's just how betting works. That's just how it all works. I'm not going to hijack this segment, although I would love to. But it is time for our worst take of the day.
The worst take on today's show, as presented by Caroline Fenton.
Ian, will you help me out here?
So freaking lazy. That's what this is. It's lazy. It is so freaking lazy. They just don't want to go to work. That's what it is.
So freaking lazy. Okay, you're not going to participate in voluntary workouts.
Just to set it up, the Titans have opted out of voluntary workouts.
Yes.
And I think it's lazy.
The Titans have opted out of voluntary workouts. Jared is very against it. I don't see, I get the point that, like, you're going to be better if you work out together. You're not going to sit at home and get fat if you don't participate in voluntary workouts. That's just absolutely ridiculous. Is it beneficial? 100%. Are you only hurting yourself if you don't work out?
And your
100%.
fans and your team.
You're hurting your teams. You're hurting your Super Bowl chances.
And your fans.
And your fans. You're not going to sit at home and get fat. These guys would not be professional athletes if all they wanted to do was sit at home and be lazy.
Jadeveon Clowney?
I'm not going to. That's a different story. I don't know if he's participating in voluntary workouts.
He didn't participate in training camp last year. Well, hey, if I'm not going to get full price, I don't want to go to training camp. How'd that work out?
How did I know for some reason that you were going to bring up Jadeveon Clowney anytime we talk about the NFL?
Because it's lazy.
Even if we talk about the Preds, Jadeveon Clowney is going to come up.
Because it's lazy. It's lazy, and he's lazy, and I'm glad he's not here anymore. Oh, I'm so glad. But no, I don't think it's the Titans. I don't think it's the Titans players saying, hey, we don't want to be a team and work out together. I don't think the Titans players are worried about COVID, and that's why they're not going to work out together. I think the union has convinced the players this is the right thing to do, and because the NFL Players Union is stupid, like Major League Baseball is stupid, I think that this is going to be a bad thing. I'm against it.
It's not a good thing, but I'm not going to say that the players are going to sit at home and be lazy and get fat.
They don't want to go to work. They don't want to go to work. A lot of us have to go to work every day. Some of us don't get to go to work for 5 months out of the year and then just kind of pack it in and do whatever we want to do. But apparently that's the life of an NFL player. That's going to do it for us. We are out of here. Preds Insiders, and boy, do they have a lot to go inside on, is coming up next. We will see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock.